Hello, everyone. Lanzer here, SANDDAO podcast, episode 71. We are 71 in. Today, we'll be doing a review of the Sandbox DAO from 2024 when it started, all the way 2026 to now when it has paused. Scope of the talk today is a review while I do a little bit of refilling here. Today is a review of all of the Sandbox DAO and a bit of a documented archive. I'm not sure if the Sandbox DAO itself, like the tech stack, will go offline and disappear from public view, similar to the YouTube channel. The Sand podcast did. This is a video to help preserve that because the Sandbox DAO was a big success for what it was, and I'd like to pay homage to that. So, got my blueberry wine, and let's roll right into this. I do not represent the Sandbox Game or the Sandbox Foundation. I am not your financial or legal advisor. Nothing I say is to be taken as financial or legal advice. When I use the word SIP, I'm talking about the Sandbox Improvement Proposal. When I say the word DAO, I mean decentralized autonomous organization. If you ever hear me say the word SandFam, I'm talking about the Sandbox community, those who participate in the people, product, and purpose of the Sandbox ecosystem. That ecosystem looks a little bit like this. We covered it originally in episode 31. And the people side, you have everywhere from the gamers to the Sandbox team. The product side, you have everything from the game client to the DAO itself. Purpose is what was originally mentioned in the 2020 white paper and expanded upon by the co-founders and CEOs of the leadership for Sandbox and Animoca. That equals ecosystem. It goes round and round every single day. Today's episode will be about the DAO itself. And because this is one of the final episodes of the Sandbox DAO and the SandDAO podcast itself, here is an alternative view, something I did originally brief in episode 31, which kind of shows it from a different lens how the products all flow into the product side, and the white paper flows into the purpose side, and the people all flow into the people side. There's SandFam right there, and the ecosystem in the middle. If you'd like to learn more about the Sandbox DAO, you can go to the DAO Education Hub and the Sandbox map and play a gamified version of it. Location is 2, comma, -154. It's down in the lower left-hand corner where Jurassic World is. If you go to Jurassic World and then you head up to the top right of Jurassic World there, you'll see Sandbox DAO, and inside that is the gamified version called the DAO Education Hub. Check that out. It was a result of one of the requests for proposals that went out a little bit. Meta Worlds didn't win that one, and we produced the DAO Education Hub. Everywhere from learn about the set process to all the cool stuff about the DAO. I'm your host, Lanzer, and I run the Meta Worlds team. We've been landowners, avatar, and we're a studio within the Sandbox game where we've produced three different experiences. The Floor Droppers, which was in Alpha Season 5, I believe, and it was in the top 10 of a major contest. And also Lava Defense, which was a Game Makers Fund 2024 awardee. And then DAO Education Hub, which was a SIP winner for the Sandbox DAO. All right, so what is the agenda today? We have 3 agenda items. We're going to review the Sandbox DAO Timeline. We're going to review the Sandbox DAO Structure and Budget. And we're going to review all 39 SIPs on Snapshot. So for number 1, reviewing the DAO timeline, that's going to start with when the DAO was originally announced in May of 2024. This Medium article this Medium article right here. It, 2 years ago. It seemed like such a long time. And then there was the NFC Lisbon. Here is this one here, which was that original announcement with Sebastian Bourget, Cyril Forte. Cyril Forte is the DAO administrator for the Sandbox DAO. So they announced the DAO at the conference there in NFC Lisbon, and all the SIPs came online. It was a big grand entrance for the Sandbox, and yeah, that's what began everything. And then, if we can, we'll cover our ending interviews with Cyril Forte back in episode 63, when I got to discuss a bit more behind the scenes with Cyril about how is progressive decentralization going, and what his perspective was on the relationship between the Sandbox Foundation and the DAO. We covered a bunch of other things that were really, really insightful and and educational. And it was definitely a long time coming. I really enjoyed that episode with Cyril. All right, and then also we just recently conducted an interview with the co-founder and global ambassador of the Sandbox. Used to be the COO, Sebastian Bourget. We covered what does a typical day in the life look like for him, what was his experience on the special council, why they maintained such a low profile the last 1.5 years, and other things pertinent to the DAO pause that led to today's podcast. Take a look at episode 68 for that. All right, and then as I said, we'll review DAO structure and review SIPs. And that will be our review of the Sandbox DAO for the last 2 years. So let's first delve into the Sandbox DAO timeline. Just kind of got to roll through this because a lot of this stuff we covered in previous episodes. So, the road to DAO. I've been keeping this one up to date as I've gone along. It used to be much bigger, but now I've pared it down to today's episode. And this is covering all the major events that happened since the grand inception in 2024. All right, so the first thing happened May 28th, 2024. It was the DAO was announced via a Medium article, and all three SIPs, it was five SIPs, but the founding SIPs were available to vote that day. So what we're talking about here is this Medium article, the Sandbox DAO vote on the future of the metaverse. It came out, and the vast majority of the excuse me, the vast majority of the Sandbox gaming community, most of us were gamers, had no idea what a DAO was. So first we had to learn what a DAO was. This article helped a little bit, but mostly we still didn't know what the DAO was by the end of it. So learning who the council members were and the advisory board, it was really, really helpful to know like what they were trying to communicate, but most of us had no idea what a DAO was. So that happened, and then we had SIPs 1, 2, and 3 come out, and those were, as soon as they pop up here. No, we'll check it out on Snapshot. How about that? Snips SIPs 1, 2, and 3 showed, and SIP 1 was introducing the Sandbox DAO here, and we'll cover that later on in our coverings of everything. SIP 2 was the Sandbox Foundation, and SIP 3 was initial budget for the DAO. All right, at the first time they popped open, the SIPs accidentally did not count land voting power. It was only counting sand voting power, so they had to resubmit it, hence why it says resubmitted there at the top. the initial reception to the May 28th was mostly negative because the community did not feel involved in that announcement, and I covered that quite a bit, which is the whole reason why I launched the SandDAO podcast. So episode 1 began with a panel of some well-known community members, and so did episode 2, and the first 10 episodes were pretty much like, what is this? What is a DAO? And talking to different members, trying to collectively come to a consensus on what it was that we were being asked to do. And so, yeah, lots of confusion, lots of frustration. A lot of the community members did not feel like they were really being asked to participate as a community and voters, more like kind of being strung along. That did improve over time, but it did take quite a bit of time. And it wasn't until really October when the new communications manager came on, Bobby Kunta, that improved. So that was May 28th, 2024. May 29th, the Sandbox DAO had that fireside chat at NFC Lisbon. That was that YouTube video that I showed there briefly of them showing, explaining what the DAO was and all that sorts of things. It was mostly a publicity type thing, and so it didn't really clarify to the rest of the community who was already familiar with the Sandbox DAO what exactly it was. So we just kind of had to stay along for the ride and work within the confines of this new and improved sandbox ecosystem, which, as I showed y'all earlier, was these things right here, right? But this one over here in the DAO, it didn't exist. It didn't exist. So no one knew really what it was. And then suddenly, boop, there it is. And now it's part of our ecosystem. I loved it immediately because the DAO to me is the perfect combination of gaming, governance, leadership, and business. And I loved all of those things. So the DAO to me represents the intersection of almost everything I love and have a passion for. Hence why I've done 71 episodes for the SandDAO podcast, which is all about the Sandbox DAO. Yep. Uh, wah. So that was May 29th. Now, June 13th is when SIPs 1, 2, and 3 were submitted. So it was, what's that, like 13 days later? They had to be resubmitted to count lands. Okay, so it was a little bit of a misstep, and that caused a lot of frustration and anger. It just kind of all compounded, right? All right, and then June, oops, that must have been June 1st. Excuse me. So June 1st, it was resubmitted. Yeah. And then also on June 1st, Mochaverse Hall, led by G is Us, hosts the first SandDAO Sandbox DAO Twitter space. So if we look over here, here's X. Here it is. This is lore at this point. Here it is, Mochaverse Hall. And they have since discontinued that. And for a long time, they were included on my spaces portion at the very end of every podcast. So you can still see them grayed out over here on this slide, right here. But they discontinued that quite some time ago. But for a while, they were one of the main Sandbox DAO hubs and also Mochaverse Hall hubs for community every week. But that's no longer the case. So it was on a Saturday. I was there. A lot of other people were there, and most of us, including myself, were like, "What is this? What are we doing? What are we doing here? What am I supposed to do?" But it did help a lot talking to people about what a DAO was, what voting was, what to expect, and that's where I started learning how much I would really, really love this. Yeah, Big Bull responded back to it. All right. And then June 4th, the DAO hosts an AMA. And by DAO, I mean the Sandbox DAO admin team and also the DAO Sandbox Game Company hosts an AMA. They try to clarify what's happening. Right, and here you can see right below that, G is us. Here's his invitation to their weekly discussion space. Right, so there's an AMA to try and clarify what this is and kind of tamp down some of the anger that was happening at the time. So then Dr. Metaverso hosts an AMA, and it was more of like a community AMA. That one helped clarify a lot of stuff. So this one was by Dr. Metaverso, who is a well-known voice in the community. It was he asked a lot of questions that the community were asking and tried to clarify a lot of stuff that there's my response 2 years ago. But a lot of stuff that needed to be said and needed to hear answers from. So it the replay bug must have hit there, so we can't really look at it. All right, so that was the AMA that Dr. Metaverso had, and then June 13th here was when SIPs 1, 2, and 3 close. They all pass with a yes vote, and that yes vote was 89%, 93%, and 64% respectively. We'll go over some details when we go over over the the SIPs themselves later. All right, then fast forward to September 10th. Sandbox DAO opens up delegation applications, and those delegation applications was via forum and also like a Google form where you could submit to be an official delegate, and each delegate was delegated 2 million voting power that they could then use on behalf of the community. So there were 12 delegates in all. I ended up applying, but I didn't get accepted. I did get something else later on as a domain allocator, but that wasn't a delegate. All right, so people like KCL, Kerchado, Mofat, uh, lots of people, lots of people applied to it. I was super happy to see that happen. So delegation opened up. A lot of people applied. Ended up 12 people were selected, and I ended up interviewing most of them during like SandDAO 40-ish, 50-ish series. Interviewed, I think, 11 of the 12. And with each person being delegated two, that meant 24 million voting power was in the hands of the community, so to speak, which ends up being an important footnote for how the Sandbox DAO was paused with the latest SIP in 39. So remember that for later. All right. Then October 7th, the DAO admin team posts an article on the way ahead. They had originally, there were different ways they were doing things. I'll go over that in the structure as to how it changed from May to October. But they posted article, and that article says we're going to update the way we do SIPs. We're going to update the way we do budgets. And I end up doing a whole podcast episode on this. I can't remember which one it was, but I went really hardcore into this one because it was so different than the way they were doing things up until that point. So they clarified a bunch of stuff, and I just had a lot of comments. I'm still, you can still see my comments here from all that time ago. I was a bit harsh at that point in time because I felt different about how things were being handled. I didn't have such as an appreciation as I do now for it. But I was very critical at the time, and you can see that in my podcast episodes when I did those updates, especially when I did an episode on that article just by itself. All right, and then October 14th, 2024, the DAO admin team announces their new communication manager, Kunta, and this is when things really started to turn around. All right, so Kunta, yeah, Cyril made the post, October 2024. Remember, this is like May, about 6 months after the DAO starts. Bobby Kunta comes in. He does an intro post introducing himself here, and it was very well received. We really loved that. He instantly got to work to clarify and really just yep. So there's one of my responses. I was all over that forums. Um, So this was in the reporting where Sarah would make frequent updates to the reporting. So when that happened, they announced Kunta MC here, and here he is, the Kunta Master himself. Give him a like and follow. He did such a great job. I was so happy to see his involvement. So he got to work rebuilding trust instantly. Started the Digging in the Sand podcast. It ran alongside mine, the SANDDAO podcast. Mine was much more free in its ability to talk, but he did such a wonderful job in showing the behind the scenes that he was a major reason why my criticism turned around to positive, was because of his ability to build bridges and show the other side of the story when it came to the DAO admin team and how the DAO was just kind of plopped in front of us, and then we were forced to vote within 14 days, or else we were left behind. So a lot of us felt like we were being drug into this rather than a community sourced and inspired decision. Kunta did a huge, huge benefit to the community by clarifying and building bridges. So hats off to you, Kunta. You the man. All right. A month later, then those 12 delegates were announced. All right. And then they talk about here the launch of the delegation page, which is still up, although some of the old delegates who have resigned are no longer there. But the 12 delegates that are there now are still there. The only ones that are new that I did not get to interview was Batman and Shanti. The others I have interviews for, all with the exception of Mo. He was the only one from Animoca Brands that I wasn't able to interview in the end. So they did they did announce that the delegates were officially live, and with that came the 24 million voting power, because there were 12 times 2 million voting power per delegate. So that was a big step, and many people, including myself, felt like that was a great thing for them to do. All right, and then November 17th is when Digging in the Sand podcast released episode 1. But guess what happened? Not long ago, I noticed, and I think I mentioned this in SandDAO 70 or 69, that the video is no longer there. The channel looks like it's been deleted. So unfortunately, Digging in the Sand podcast is no longer there. It was wonderful, and I loved it. And there are many episodes that I covered, especially the first few. I covered them and did a reaction video to them. So I'll cover all of this in the next episode when I do a review of the SandDAO podcast. Whereas right now I'm doing a review of the Sandbox DAO. So we'll gloss over that part. Okay. That'll close us out in 2024. The rest of it, not really like road to DAO type stuff. All right, 2025 happens. And SIP-23 comes out, which was the 2025 budget and strategic direction. We were supposed to receive another funding infusion of 15 million sand. That did not happen, although there was a SIP coming out talking about how we were going to reallocate the budget. All right, that was a major piece of legislation for the DAO, but it ended up not being used because another endowment wasn't ever sent. Also, that was a bit of foreshadowing, let's call it. That happened in March. So we're talking 3 months after the endowment was supposed to happen, that SIP comes out. All right. And then later on in March, SIP number 25 comes out. All right. And when 25 comes out, it's to establish the Sandbox DAO grants program, which establishes little mini budgets. And there were about 5 elected domain allocators who are managers of those budget. I was one of them, community engagement domain, and I loved it. I thought it was great. We were able to very quickly award the fast and helpful projects that moved much faster than SIPs did. All right, so that was another piece of DAO expansion in our road to DAO. Yeah, it was a big success in my opinion. They did a post-mortem report on that, and Kunta, did this little breakdown here of 114 applications, 6,400 USDC, 230,000 and allocated USDC grants, and 80 milestones were paid. 186,000 USDC was paid out, accepted 36, and 26 grants were completed. It was a lot. Most of it was in mine, the community engagement here. I had 54 that I received, and I accepted 15. So, it was a great thing. I loved it. I'm very happy they did that, and I think it had the intended effect they were looking for. All right, so there's the postmortem, and there it is. Okay. I wanted to zero in on mine. The grant application itself was had allocations and was able to push out quite a bit. I think I did a podcast episode. I don't remember which one on this one. So it I evaluated about 342,000. I approved 16 grants and approved 71,000 USDC. I spent the whole budget of $71,000, and we completed 15 of them. The 16 one was really a two-parter, so all 16 were completed, but one of the 15 was also the 16th because it was a dual grant. And it was great. 200,000 sand. All right, so that was mine. In community education, there were 4 others. It's a big deal. All right, that was March. Now fast forward to August. All right, some bad news hits. The Sandbox company gets restructured, and those words come from the Sandbox company itself talking about the where's that where they use restructuring? There it is. They use that word in their official announcement here, where they talk about a response to recent news about changes where the Arthur Madrid and Sebastian Bourget step down as CEO and COO, and they become something else, chairman and global brand ambassador. And the new CEO is Robbie Young, who comes in from CEO of investments at Animoca Brands. So that restructuring happens, offices are closed down, different presences are reduced around the world. And we learn later that, Indonesia gets hit pretty hard. The Korean um, Sandbox Korea gets hit pretty hard. And there's a lot of, it's not great news, right? It's a foreshadowing of things to come. That was August of last year in 2025. Then in December of of December 15th, at the end of last year, is when Robbie Young does an AMA for what is next for Sandbox, which he calls Sandbox 3.0. I do a number of episodes on this, 68, 69, 70, I believe. So, it's right. These right here. um, Leading to the Sandbox DAO pausing. So 67, 68, 69, and 70. There's a reaction, an interview, a SIP review of SIP 39, and then the update after the SIP closes and is passed. All right, so that happens in the December of last year, and then in January of this year, so a couple months ago, the DAO admin team announces SIP 39, which is a pausing of the Sandbox DAO. And that SIP 39 comes in the normal form. It has 2 weeks of discussion. Not much has changed. I think if anything has changed. So I don't really think they listened to the discussion at all. They just kind of had the discussion because that's what the rules said. and I do a whole podcast episode, like I just showed, of this SIP review, and then the Sandbox Game hosts an AMA on that, which gets hit by the replay bug. I still was able to do a reaction video to it as best I could, and after that, we had Sebastian Bourget come on for an interview, part 2, which we started in SANDDAO episode 8. All right, so you're almost caught up. Then February 11th, 14 days after, SIP-39 vote starts. And in February 28th of last month, about a month ago, it closes with 80% yes, 9% no, 11% abstain. And I do an entire episode on those results and why they were not above board, why some hijinks were pulled, and it was a little bit I don't know, it didn't look very good for the Sandbox DAO to do what it did. But it passed, and now the Sandbox DAO will be paused in about 9 days at the end of the month here in March 2026. So, some good blueberry wine. So, that catches you up from May 2024 now to March 21st, 2026. All right, so what did we learn? The Sandbox DAO began with a $15 million 15 million sand gift or an endowment from the Sandbox Game company. The vision was sold as progressive decentralization, which meant going from centrally managed, which was the DAO admin team and the Sandbox Game company, to a community owned and managed, which would be the council and other working groups that the Sandbox DAO would evolve into. And it had a fall from grace about August 2025. All right. And then a fall from grace in August 2025 when CEO restructuring happened and new leadership instead of fall from grace, let's say major change to the DAO happened, and new leadership was introduced with a new vision for the game. Let's say the company. Yeah. All right. So now you're all caught up. That would be the Sandbox DAO timeline. I'm really glad I kept this slide. I never really used it much. I may have referenced it a couple times in episodes, but now it comes in real handy because it kept track of all the major events that happened. So that was the Sandbox DAO timeline. Now, let's get to the structure. So, with it starting in May of 2024, what then were we faced with? What happened? What was the DAO about? Let's get into that now. Here is what the structure of the Sandbox DAO was. It is. I say was because it's been paused. All right, so the launch of the DAO happened. That fireside chat happened as well. And think I have, yeah, there we go. So let's get into this. About 9 minutes in the 30-minute thing interview. All right, so here it is.
Listen to, because you're saying we wanted to have the right product. So you're not looking at the outside world saying, okay, there is a bull market, a bear market.
So there you go. That's where they're talking about progressive decentralization, heavy curation by the DAO admin team to ensure that the vision of the DAO is executed, and then slowly, Sebastian Bourget mentioned this quite a few times. Like when you have a child, you first start them out with training wheels when you're treating them or showing them how to ride a bike, and then slowly over time you can take the training wheels off when they're ready for that. That's kind of the analogy he used. All right, so the other one, let's take a look. Okay, so there you go. You can watch the whole interview if you would like. So that was the launch of the DAO. All right, so when they launched the DAO, also with that came the website itself. And when you got to the website, it still looks very similar to what it started out with. The vision, proposal, delegation, about the forums, which is a discourse. You can connect your wallet because it also connected to the like a little voting module, a voting module. So here on the front page, it's your time to govern. How does it work? You discover and debate, vote for change, witness the impact, and then reasons to join. Here, become a decision maker, influence the creative narrative, elevate your digital real estate, shape the games you love, and then what other testimonials people were saying about stuff. And Sandbox had a lot of branding, a lot of partnerships like Paris Hilton, Care Bears, Steve Aoki, and many others like Dead Mouse, The Walking Dead, Atari, Gucci. It it got pretty. They have a really impressive partnership. All right, so there's that. And then here in the vision, they would talk about how the vision is to grow the DAO, and the strategic objectives for last year was to empower, and 2025 was to empower the community, diversify the funding, align with long-term goals, leverage assets. And here's a picture of the Sandbox community and all of the different digital real estate that was out there, and I can spot where we are over here in the Meta Worlds logo. But you can see like Republic Realm, Gemini, Sandrush, MetFi, Binance, Whale.me, Cyberkongs, a lot of punks and apes. There were a lot of really well-known faces that absolutely had involvement. Hey, Nakajaki Chan, how you doing? Yeah, yeah. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for popping up on the stream. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, so there's the vision, and they also had ethics. Here are all the ethics. I went over this in detail when we talked about that new article that came out in October 2024. And then you could also vote in proposals here on the website by connecting your wallet, and then here are the proposals. So they had their own little module for that. And then submission guidelines when you wanted to submit a SIP idea after you invited. You would first submit here on the forums, but that changed in October, and we'll go over that later in the instruction or the structure. All right, so how does it work? You submit the idea, receive interest, submit your SIP. Admin team curates. The council issues a recommendation, and authors refine. Then you get funded, and you can apply for these funding categories right here. Same categories as DAO domain allocators we had, and mine was the community engagement and charity section. All right, SIP budget requested. You had different milestones and different requirements for the payouts, and on the checklist, what was allowable, things that you needed to make sure that you did, what was not allowable, all of the ineligible things. I cover this pretty in depth in that October 2024 update article reaction. And then, what are the steps after that? Discussion for 14 days, voting for 14 days, and then implements. Here's a guide to promote your SIP, like how to promote your SIP. It was pretty comprehensive. It was really well done. And then SIP implementation, complete your milestones, make your payments, invoice through, request finance. and there's the payment details there. And then if things are paused or revoked, which end up happening with SIP pausing, right? And then if your SIP gets rejected, you have to wait 3 months, right? So that was your proposal section, and then a delegation, which we showed earlier, is how do you delegate? Delegate via snapshot, and then how do you become a delegate? You can or delegate. Check out this type form. I also do an episode on this when they did it. So you can review that episode for what the form used to be. And then here are the current delegates, all 12 of them. Here was the delegate video from Digging in the Sand podcast, which was deleted. So it's no longer showing. And then some FAQs. Yeah, how much voting power do I have? What does delegation mean? What happens to my tokens when I delegate? Who can I choose as my delegate? Are there any costs to delegating? Is delegating my voting power compulsory? How can I change my delegate? How can I override my delegate's vote? How can I delegate more than one wallet? Why am I unable to delegate? And do delegates receive any compensation? And if you have a question, that pushes you over here to the Discord. Right, and then you go to the about section, which shows you about like the Sandbox DAO Foundation, the special counsel, and how their term ended December 31st, 2025. Not very recently, but it was Frederic Montagnon, Jean-Michel Paun, Shannon Snow, Yatsu, Sebastian Bourget were on the special counsel, which gave recommendations and to the SIPs and gave overall guidance to align the Sandbox DAO with the vision. And then the advisory board were cultural ambassadors and advisors that help leverage their expertise in their career fields. Anthony Chow, Ina Moja, Loretta Chen, Mateus Vivian, used to be a football player, like a soccer player. Mia Bao, who we've had on as an interview in SandDAO podcast. Samuel Choi, and then Zaf Chow. All right, and then you had the forums, and the forums themselves were pretty cool. Announcements, SIP ideas, SIP active. There's now it's closed section of the Sandbox DAO grant program, general help improvement, SIP finish, that sort of stuff. Right, so the interesting thing is that my where's mine? I think it, yeah. Hold on a second. So in the DAO forums, I think I have the most responses out of anyone because I really bought into the DAO and I was a big proponent of it. So, I was ready to go to apply for the special counsel, and I had like my what I wanted to do. I was ready for that when the term ended in December, but here's the profile with where's the summary for this? Um yeah, this one. Okay, so I joined not long after it started. I posted something 8 hours ago, I think. 2,600 views. Uh, 5,600 cheers, which are guess likes. And here are my these stats. I'm pretty sure I have the highest amount of like responses and time spent on the forums just because of how much I enjoyed it. 9 days of reading time, 593 days visited, 4 hours reading time recently, 576 topics viewed, 8,000 posts read, 1,000 likes given, 3,000 likes received, 49 topics created, 1.9 thousand posts created. Oh man. Yeah. So uh that's funny. And then badges and stuff that we got out of all that, which are oh gosh. Yeah. But I think they ranked them somewhere. All right, let's see if they got the ranking here. Posts created? Nope. Maybe it's under this likes received. No. It should be. Oh, here it is. The global leaderboard, right? Here's the global leaderboard, all time. Yeah, yeah. So here, uh, I spent a lot of time on the forums. So as you can see, I'm number one. But Kami coming in at 2,500 cheers, which are like likes, and Yegor 2,300 likes. So yeah. But then here's your ranking: Snipes, Hishmad, Zhao Long, a lot of well-known faces: Sebga, Shanti, Tobin, Batman, Kerchado, The Intern, Geraldine, Money Doctor Metaverso, Crypto, Diplo, Biverson, Fiona, a lot of Cyril, Pepe, Meow, Victorian Bag, Mark Bago, Roxy, Yule, Lily Rose, Polka Sandeep, Ike, Ikemon, Tobik, Ixura, Malamaya, and it goes on and on and on. Arthmort, there's Adankoi, Gonzacola, Kenley Kristen, a lot of well-known faces that have been helping contribute to the ecosystem. So I'll just scroll through them here, kind of like an homage. Oh, it keeps going. Mega Mao, yay! Mr. Right Now, Benefitura. We had they were on the podcast as one of the SIP authors. So we keep going all the way down. Let's stop at number 100. Number 100 is King of Crypto. Oh, nice. King of Crypto. Number 100. So there's that leaderboard. Oh gosh, that's really funny. Yeah, thanks. Not Jackie Chan. My accomplishment: the Sandbox DAO, number one on Cheers. All right, so let's keep going on our launch of the DAO. So there's the website and there's the forums. So that launched, and then we went over the vision already. We went over the ethics. We went over the roadmap. Did we go over the roadmap? Where in phase one was DAO debut. Phase two was exploring how the DAO will begin to separate itself further from the sandbox, its parent company. And then phase three is a full launch, which is unveiling the full scope and opportunities of the DAO. That was that earlier promise that I mentioned of going from progressively decentralized, from centrally managed to fully decentralized. This was on the roadmap, which I think has since been just no longer showing, right? No longer shows on the website, but it did. And I made sure to do this because I needed to remember in all my podcasting, right? So then little tidbits I kept track of along the way of different AMAs and stuff of responses. And then we went over the special counsel. Their term expired 31 December 2025. A new special counsel was not elected, and Kami, a number of others were going to run for it because we wanted to have community elected leadership that was very involved and took a front seat row to helping the DAO. But that didn't happen. And then we had the advisory board, also term expired 31 December, and no new elections were had. All right. And then we had our delegates over here. We went over the delegate dashboard and the current delegates that are there. All right, so some interesting facts that I've been keeping track of. I shared this a couple times. One sand equals one voting power. One land equals 4,500 voting power. So that means with 3 billion max supply, if you look at CoinGecko, all right, so there's right now it's trading at 0.79 cents, 0.079 cents. And the circulating supply is 22.6 billion, but the total supply is 3 billion. Right, so there's 0.4 billion not in circulation per CoinGecko, and which means that, back to interesting facts, that there was 3 billion max supply times 1 VP per sand. That's 3 billion voting power that you can obtain by owning sand. For land, one land equals 4,500 voting power. There are 166,000 lands per the Sandbox website here. If you go to Sandbox Game, slash about. You can see how the land is structured, right? If you never bought it, how do you create it, build, buy, monetize, all the play to earn mechanics, right? But up here in the front portion, the explanation talks about how there's 166,464 land available, which times 4,500 voting power per land is 749 million voting power, which means there is 3.7 billion voting power available. But remember, circulating means in the hands of people that can use it. Non-circulating means it's not been released or available to the public. So there's certainly less than that that's available to be used, but maximum total voting power that can be used eventually is 3.7 billion. Right? So there's still land that hasn't been released of the 166,000, and there's still sand in reserve, strategic reserve, not released out into the market of the 3 billion. So it's going to be less than 3.7 billion. All right, so the voting process, each SIP requires 30 million quorum for each vote to count. So it doesn't matter if the majority yes happens in the SIP. If it doesn't reach 30 million voting, which is 1% of 3 billion, then it doesn't count. It doesn't matter if it's yes or no. So it has to reach 30 million. And for a while, when we get to the whole SIP review part, for a while, that was a big deal because we couldn't reach quorum for a number of SIPs. Right, so 1% of 3 billion of the max supply is 30 million. That's how they came up with the number. Each constitutional SIP requires 150 million, which is a 5% quorum. Right, so that was called quorum. You needed 30 million for every regular SIP, 150 million for constitutional SIPs. And each SIP requires a majority yes vote, which is greater than 50% yes for it to pass. All right. And then, oh, I'm sorry. That's wrong. You can get like 31% yes, 30% no, 30% abstain. That's not the right math. Let's math this a little different. So if you had 30% no, 30% yes, and dang it, I did that math wrong again. All right, let's start over. Out of 100% total, if you had 30% no, 30% abstain, you're left with 40% to yes. That means yes got the majority. It didn't get greater than 50%, but it did get the majority, and then the SIP would pass. So it was simple majority vote with mostly 3 options: yes, no, abstain. All right. Then here's the budget. We went over the budget as well. It used to be a lot greater. We used to have sand initiatives, live ops, game content, other operations, staking, sandbox for good, platform, and NFT. Those have since changed, and the SIP that rearranged the 2025 budget. But that is originally what that 15.4 million sand was allocated toward. We were supposed to get that 10 million sand top up earlier in 2025. That didn't happen. So that was the budget and allocation. Right. And here where we did some investigating, here are the actual budget contents. That has since disappeared from the dashboard, but I made screenshots of it. And then here were the 9 wallets, that they were in. Here on Etherscan. All right, so there's one. Here's the second wallet. Here's the third wallet. The fourth wallet. The fifth wallet. Sixth wallet. Seventh wallet. Eighth wallet. And the ninth wallet. And as you can see, most of them do not have holdings. One of them has a 10,000. The rest of them just don't. don't have anything in them anymore. So with the DAO pause came the DAO withdrawal. Okay, so I mentioned in that in May there was something that happened. The way the SIPs used to be, where anyone could submit SIPs, which is why in my early podcasts I would show, in addition to the checkbook here, the scoreboard. So in this scoreboard, I would show like how many meta worlds submitted. We submitted 10. I submitted 10 SIPs. And that was back when anyone could submit a SIP and they did not have to get invited by the DAO admin team. So window resizing, roadmap releases, in-game inventory filter, DAO revenue option study, the Sandex, the SANDDAO podcast, funding, builder challenge working group, Sandbox governance working group, reducing the DAO voting quorum. That was back when it was a big problem. And then the delegates solved that issue for us. And then establishing the volume voting criteria, because the Sandbox wallet kept voting. The Sandbox wallet kept voting, and we wanted to establish criteria to where it would stop voting just kind of arbitrarily. And when we delve into the SIPs a little bit, you'll see what I mean. All right, so this was the scorecard, and I used to show this at the beginning of every podcast, and it would show, how many SIPs were approved. It would show not approved. It just kind of showed status, and eventually just got too much to keep track of on one little slide, so I had to abandon it. And the last update was in January 2025, so it's been quite some time since I updated that. But the checkbook, I also showed this quite often, and the checkbook was an accounting of the SIPs and how much our budget was, and what passed, what didn't, of the 9 budget categories here, and then how much was left. So that was the last time I updated that was December of 2024, because it too, it became obsolete when that new SIP came out that rearranged all the budgets, and I didn't really know how to adjust it. So I did end up finding a fix for it, which I'll show during the SIP review part. But I kept track of the SIPs, and I think I got all the way to SIP 19 or so before I had to, before it just became no longer relevant. All right, so that was way back when, in May of 2024, the anyone could submit SIPs, and that was, and I showed, I think, on the forums. All right, so if you go to the forums here, then under SIP ideas, if you go to old ideas, it's where they moved them. I think you'll see a lot of stuff. Like here's mine. Some of the ones I mentioned, like SIP-4 idea, revenue options. Excuse me. A lot of old ones here. All right, so here's Lanzer. Oh, I guess I did more than 10. The Sandbox DAO Transparency Act, the Santra Act. Right, that's right. I remember saying that. Want to establish some more transparency standards. Right, do an org chart, and that was after episode 34 when we couldn't figure out who was where doing what. It was a little bit difficult. I had to do a whole episode on it, try and figure it out. And yeah, there we go. So there's my whole list. And the last one I did was the Sandbox DAO Transparency Act. So that was back when anyone could submit, and many people did, and it all had to go through curation. And that was where in the video when we showed earlier, Cyril was mentioning how the DAO admin team would put it through curation. So I had 11 SIPs going through curation, and a number of them got through, like a few of them got through to vote, and a few of them passed. But most of them did not get through curation in time before they changed the rules. And that October article, October 2024, I did a whole episode on this, episode 35. And we The new process was a DAO, an invite only. So not everyone who could submit could be invited. You would submit, and if enough people showed interest, and if the DAO admin team thought it was worthy enough, then they would invite you to to um, submit a SIP draft, and that would go through curation and possible passing, whereas before anyone could. And I did a little process thing here. It used to be a 5-step process from submitting to public discussion to special council recommendation, then goes the vote on snapshot, then it gets implemented. If it gets rejected, 30-day wait period to try again. It took anywhere from 60 to 150 days. And based on my experience, it was based on my experience and others. The new process in October extended that from 150 days to 90 to 270 days, and it lengthened the process from a 5-step process to an 8-step process, where it added in step 2, submit the SIP to the DAO Typeform link. Then they went through a curation, then a second curation, and then so it gave more opportunities for curation to refine it, curate the SIP, sometimes reject it. In my case, one of mine was rejected during second round curation versus the first round. It was really frustrating. Um, it was the sand chest, the one that received a lot of support after the sandbox the SandDAO podcast SIP failed by a few like a few couple million votes, which is very small margin. Out of that came the sand chest, um, which was kind of like a big group funding effort for a lot of content creators instead of just one like me. And but that couldn't make it past that second round curation. This one over here, step 5. It received it received special counsel recommendation, but it did not get past that second round because one of the reviewers thought it needed to be different and had a way he wanted it to go, and we could not get past our impasse because I didn't want to change it so much that the SIP was unrecognizable, and that was kind of one of the downfalls of SIP curation, and especially in this new process was had 2 ways that it could fail because the DAO admin team disagreed with you. So there it is, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we have 39 SIPs versus ApeCoin DAO had like 400 SIPs or AIPs, excuse me. Big difference in the number of proposals that went to vote. And yeah. So that was the new process. All right, and then I did a little bit more of an explanation and kind of that 5-step process here and how it expanded to the 8-step process and kind of the details behind that. All right, so then we get to the founding SIPs, SIPs 1, 2, and 3, and when you go to SIP 1, it did pass with a yes, and in its appendix you could find the Sandbox DAO Foundation Constitution, which ended up being a whole mini series by itself. Right, and then SIP number 2, in the appendix you could find the Sandbox Foundation Articles of Association and the Memorandum of Association, which are like founding documents. And that kind of got us down. And then SIP 3 was the initial budget, approving the 15 million sand allocation. And that kind of led us down a whole rabbit trail of what is a sandbox foundation, right? So then we started going through all those foundation documents, like what are articles, what are memorandums, why were Cayman Island duty stamps all over it, what acts and regulations is it referring to, um, what are subscribers, like all the things that started really just like, what is this? And we went through a whole mini series. So it started with episode 34, and we started clarifying and going through everything later on. I've gone over this many times, and we ended up creating a TLDR out of it. What is a foundation company, exempted company, limited by guarantee, without any share capital, articles, memorandums, lots of business being done in Cayman Islands. Foundation rules are very flexible, and what does it mean to be governed by Grand Cayman Island law. We did a big series on that. So check that out because we went over in detail the laws and regulations that were at play for Sandbox Foundation. And the Sandbox Foundation is the legal entity that guards the DAO. It is a legal representative of the DAO. It is not the DAO. It is a company that protects the DAO and enforces it and represents it in the real world. But the DAO itself is the voting DAO with the tech stack, the discourse, the website we showed you, whereas the foundation is a business in the Grand Cayman Islands under the law, which is put into part by the Companies Act, the Foundations Company Act, and the different case law that surrounds disputes within businesses. All right, and then we went over Companies Management Act, the Directors Registration Licensing Act, Securities Investment Business Act, the the Virtual Asset Service Provider Act. We even went through the Citations of Acts Parliament Act, which changed a lot of words that said law into acts. So that's where if you see foundations company law in some of my earlier videos, it was officially changed to acts. So the more you know. And then we did so that was parts, one. There ended up being not 9 parts in all, and then we covered the commercial side, which was talking to actual practicing foundation company lawyers like Walker's Global, and then we actually interviewed a professional director who runs foundation companies in the Grand Cayman Islands. So hugely successful miniseries in determining what it was, what was a foundation company, and how did it relate to the Sandbox DAO. So, excuse me. We started with SANDDAO 34, where we tried to figure out who was who in the zoo, like what was everyone's place in all of this, and then we revealed quite a bit through a lot of research, and some of this was wrong, but I got most of it right in the end. Why was it that everything was located in the Grand Cayman Islands? And there were some really good reasons for that to comply with the law in the Grand Cayman Islands and all of the services that were required to run a company for that supported and protected the DAO. Right, so that series you can find here, episode 34, 56, 57, 59, 60, 62, 64, 65, and 66 was the wrap up, where it's kind of like a celebration episode and roll it all up into a nice little TLDR. But all of these things were, if you want to learn about financial companies and the Grand Cayman Islands, go check that out because this goes in depth and I can create my own foundation company now that I know how to do this. It's just a matter of, talking to the right people, paying the right fees, and then standing up a business that can shield your DAO or others. But a foundation company ended up being like the best of a trust and of an LLC kind of put together. It's really cool. So what did we learn by going through the Sandbox DAO structure? Is the special counsel and advisory board kept a really low profile, and when the term expired in December 2025, re-elections did not happen. All right, not Jackie Chan said in the chat, hopeful for things to improve in Sandbox. Don't know the details, but I know leadership and things shifting around. Hopefully, a more solid and realistic environment. Feels like it, slow and steady. Absolutely. Absolutely not Jackie Chan. Thanks for just for talking and being here. Really appreciate that. All right, and then also did we learn by going through this? This DAO admin team held enormous power in running the DAO. They basically were the gatekeepers for everything. Your SIP did not get passed to vote without going through them, and if they did not like it, and not all of my SIPs went through, most of them did not go through. A number of them did not go through because there was some sort of objection, opposition, concern. I was able to get through some of them, but the curation team was small compared to how many applications they had. So most of mine didn't get to because they just didn't have time or bandwidth. Some of them did though, and I was immensely grateful for that happening. All right, so and then the progressive decentralization ended up not happening as fast as was originally planned. Yep, that's a good word there, AI. Thank you for offering that word. And so here now we are at SIP 39 where the DAO is pausing and we're we're no longer able to continue DAO operations. So that progressive decentralization has now come to a pause. Okay. So that's what we learned now in by going through the Sandbox DAO structure. Now let's go through. Give me 1 second. Okay, now let's get to the last part of today's podcast episode. Let's go through the SIPs. Now, the instead of going through all of these snapshots here, all of them on snapshot, which we could do. Instead, what I did was I went back to the my original checkbook here, and I redid it. I refreshed it for this podcast episode, right? And one of the things I took into account was that the admin team had a different math than I did, a different view on the way things way things should have been put together. And Cyril went over this in SIP 39 when I was talking about my numbers, and when I went over things like this here and my numbers in the Sandbox DAO calculations, how much SIPs cost and all that. And then Cyril came in and he said it was a little bit oversimplified. He gave me some pointers and how he came up with a number that was about 891,000 left over. Um, and I could not recreate those numbers. So I'm going to go over mine because I don't know how he came up with his. He said that his was internal, so like an internal profit and loss was how he came up with his. And I didn't have access to that internal profit and loss, so I'm going to use my numbers, and I'll present kind of a differing solution. So we're going to go over the results of each SIP, and at a high level, we're not going to go into every single SIP's details, but we're going to do that now, and then we'll go over the statistics at the end, and then we will almost be done. So let's let's go over that. All right. So let's go over the SIPs. Now, there are statistics that I've automatically calculated here. We'll go over those last. So what we're going to do now is go over kind of at a high level. What happens here is I have some columns for the SIP number. Let's reset. Go to 200%. There we go. Can you see a little better? Yeah, it should be able to. So the columns are, SIP number, when the vote ended, the result, if it passed or failed, the SIP amount. Not every SIP was in sand, so that's kind of where the calculation went a little bit different than what Cyril had calculated, because my numbers were I calculate relative values. I calculate all sorts of stuff you'll see here in a second. Then I had to convert that to USDC because some were in euros, some were in sand. I think one was in British pounds, in USDC in different denominations. So I had to unify them, and I did so in USDC. And what was the SIP name? A Sandbox Improvement Proposal name. Who was the author? A number of authors were by the Sandbox Game Company, and others were by the community. The council's recommendation, whether the Sandbox wallet voted, and how many wallets end up voting. What was the percentage of yes? What was the percentage of no? Percentage of abstain? And what was the quorum percentage? Because remember, we had to reach 100% quorum, which is 30 million, right? And we didn't always do that. For a while, we struggled. So what was that quorum amount that we voted with? And when the Sandbox DAO did vote, or the Sandbox Game Company voted with its wallet, it usually voted with 27 million until SIP 39, which was a special case. I went over that. But uh, there we go. So that was when it did vote. What would the vote have been without it? Because it wasn't supposed to vote. There were rules that they were supposed to abide by. They were supposed to let the community vote, and in some cases that just didn't happen. Sometimes it was on accident. Other times it was the Sandbox wallet really wanted it to go a certain way. All right, and then here's one of the key pieces of this is I calculated, or I had some Chat GPT help me with pulling the exchange rates of Sand to USDC, Sand to euros, Sand to British, Great Britain pound, so the British pound, Polygon to USDC, Ethereum to USDC, euros to USDC, and the British pound to the USDC. So I had to calculate a lot of numbers in order to keep the math correct. And so I pulled the exchange rate on the day that each SIP vote ended, right? And it changed over time. The first SIP was June 13th, 2024. The last SIP was February 25th, 2026. So you can see that the exchange rate, it went up a little bit. The height it reached was 60 cents sand back in SIP 22, which was March 2025. And then it went down from there to where it's trading right now, which is 9 cents. All right, so then I calculate an average, which was over the past 2 years. The average sand price was 39 cents. The average Polygon price was 38 cents. And the average Ethereum price was $2,919. So that was the average over the course of all 39 SIPs. So this is how I calculated the converted to USDC. I calculated the amount of the SIP value converted to USDC on the day the vote ended. And so that's how I ended up calculating these numbers on the left, which was like the USDC received by the DAO, spent by the DAO. When it received the 15 million, what was that amount worth on the day the vote ended? All right. And then Cyril's point to me was that that's not how he calculates it in his profit and loss. His is relative. So he calculated 819,000 was relative. That's how much was left based on today's exchange rate. So for me, if I were to use that same calculation, I got 354,000 versus his 891,000. Again, pretty big difference. But I don't have access to his exact formula, so I had to use mine, and this was the one that made the most sense to me. So let's go over the results for all 39 SIPs, then we'll go over the statistics, and then we'll be done. All right. SIP-1 was a reintroduction or introducing the Sandbox DAO. It was a $0 SIP, right? It received a positive rating, and the Sandbox wallet did not vote on it, right? Neither did they with the first three SIPs, which were our foundation SIPs, right? So SIP 2, SIP 3 was the Sandbox Foundation, and then the initial budget. The Sandbox Foundation clocked in at $100,000, and then that was an expense. That's how much the Sandbox Foundation would cost, is $100,000. But then SIP 3 was in the endowment by the Sandbox Game Company, so a gift to the Sandbox DAO of 15.5 million sand, which converted at the time on that day and in June 2024 was 6.8 million USDC dollars. So all three of them received positive ratings by the council. All three of them, the when I say council, I mean special council, right? So let's put that there. Special council recommendation. And the Sandbox wallet did not vote for those three. 1,000 wallets voted on each of those SIPs. And it was an overwhelming yes for the first two. It was a majority yes for the third. And that third one was a splitting of that 15 million into those 9 budgets that I showed you earlier. If you look down the bottom right of the podcast screen, you'll see these here. When we went over this budget allocation and those 9 budgets with those 9 wallets. So a lot of people disagreed with how those budgets should be should be allocated because as you can see, Sand Initiatives here has 3.6 million, Live Ops had 3 million, game content 2.5 million, and it goes down on and on. So a lot of people disagreed about that allocation, and so that's why its percentage was a lot less. It's 65% yes. All right, and the abstain votes were pretty small. The quorum was over 136, right? So we needed 30 million, and the first three got about 40 million each, right? So 10 million more quorum than what was needed, hence 136 quorum, 136% quorum. All right, and we did not have to calculate without the TSV vote because they didn't vote. And then at the time, sand was 44 cents. So that's how I did my calculations with the like 6.8 million. Because at that day, it was 44 cents. And Ethereum was 3,400 bucks, right? Those were the days. And then that's the first three SIPs, which were foundation SIPs. All right. And then in June, same month, SIPs 4 and 5 came out. All right, now SIPs 1 through 3 passed. SIPs 4 and 5 also passed. They were out of the SIPs 4 and 5 were charity SIPs. Carbon capture partnership with NZC company and then supporting the Red Cross through a prize pool with Yo Bike. Those all received positive special counsel recommendations. The carbon capture was about $179,000, and which was converted from 400,000 sand, and 200,000 sand for the Red Cross, which is about $90,000. Right? The Sandbox wallet did vote for those. Right? So they applied 27 million voting power to that, and I don't remember why that happened. I don't recall, but about 1,000 wallets voted for those as well. The yes vote was 81%. However, because the Sandbox wallet voted, and I believe they voted yes. Let's take a look. All right, so if we go to the votes over here, yeah, they voted yes. Right, so there's 27 million. They voted yes. And by the way, all of these statistics that I'm showing you, all I did was go here to snapshot, and I went to each and every single one of these sips, and I recorded the number, right? So here you can see 33 votes. All right, let's go to SIP-1 actually. Here you can see 1.1 thousand votes, 135% quorum 2 years ago. Here's the yes percentage, no percentage, abstain. Quorum was 135%. Here's when it was created, started, and that's when the vote ended. Here in the votes, you can see how everyone voted. So you can go check those numbers if you like, but they're accurate to what I have listed here. I checked them again. Okay, so that was SIPs 4 and 5. And quorum was 194% and 182%. And quorum voting amount was 58 million and 54 million. So if you take away the Sandbox's 27 million, it still, both of them still, actually, I'm sorry, one of them would have passed with, which was the carbon capture SIP-4, because it reached quorum at 31 million. But the Red Cross would not have passed because it needed 30 million to pass quorum. And so even though it had a yes vote, it would not have passed because it was only at 27 million. So I think that was one of the reasons why the Sandbox wallet voted. Again, I don't remember the reason, but that was probably it because it looked like it was going to fail. So what we can do is we could, just for this one, we could take a look at SIP-4 and see when they voted. All right, so if we look at the votes, we'll see Sandbox, it created May 9th, I'm sorry, May 29th, 2024, and the Sandbox wallet voted on that day. So, okay, I'm not sure why they voted. No one else did either. It made a lot of people angry. All right, and then again, we calculated the amounts by recording the day of amounts for the exchange rates, right? So that's how we did column K. Okay, after that, then SIP 6, 7, 8 all came out in July of 2024. And SIP number 6 was Magic Palette, which was a wonderful tool. Almost everyone loves that tool. It's kind of like if you're ever a builder or studio, you know just how hard it is to build in Game Maker. It's crashing all the time. It's like single block placement. It was really difficult to work with, and Magic Palette made that really easy. It did a lot of um, uh, it did a lot of automation and what is it called? Like sequencing, where it would like a procedurally generated, where it would like Minecraft, like create a world for you by you selecting different blocks. It did a lot of like mass copy paste, and it made things a lot easier. So Magic Palette was hugely supported. It clocked in at $119,000, which was 350,000 sand at the time. And then um, the next one was a staking budget for landowners. So it augmented the landowners' staking big time. And if you were a landowner at that time, you saw your yield go up. I don't remember what it was. It was more than 10%, but your yield went up big time, and your emissions. So that was about 250,000 or 750,000 sand at the time. $250,000. And then there's the game jam. Sandbox Game Company came up with the idea for the DAO to fund the game jam. So it did. It submitted a SIP for about $9,000 or 27,000 sand. And interestingly, though, Magic Palette received a positive by the special counsel, but and that was a community. So Pepe from SandRush, huge supporter, love Pepe big time. And but the two Sandbox DAO, I'm sorry, the two Sandbox Game SIPs, which were Staking Budget and Game Jam, both received a neutral rating. And so we've had this clarification from different special council members over and this podcast. We've had two special council members, I think. One special council member? Can't recall now. One or two special council members and a couple advisory board members. Mia Bao, Loretta Chen, and for special counsel, we've had Sebastian Bourget. I think that might be it. But in any case, we had them kind of explain to us. Positive meant they thought it aligned with the vision and benefit of the DAO. Neutral was it could go either way. Negative was they did not think that SIP aligned with the vision of the DAO. But and most importantly is if you had a negative recommendation, that did not stop your SIP from voting. That just meant that the council thought that it wasn't in line with the vision. So you could have a negatively recommended SIP go to vote. Yes, that did influence the public vote because a lot of people went with the recommendation. However, it didn't mean that it wasn't. It didn't mean that your SIP was completely out of the running from the beginning. You still had a chance. And one of my SIPs received a negative recommendation, and it did pass. Which one was that? Was this one? Nope. Wait, that one did not pass. That one failed. See, it was this one, SIP-21, where it was enabling Windows resizing and resolution for the game client itself. It received a negative recommendation from the council, but it ended up passing with a majority yes vote of 48%. So it doesn't always happen that a negative vote tipped the scales, but it did matter. So you wanted a negative. I'm sorry. You wanted a positive. You would accept a neutral, and you didn't want a negative because of the way the voting went. So for SIPs 6, 7, and 8, all three of 6 SIPs and 7 passed, but SIP 8 failed because for 6 SIPs and 7, which was Magic Palette and Staking Budget, the Sandbox did not vote in any of those. Less than 1,000 wallets started voting, and that's when quorum really started getting difficult. But Magic Palette had a 99% yes vote, and it reached quorum by the skin of its teeth. 31 million. So only a million over the 30 million quorum. And so it reached 104% quorum. Whereas the staking budget with the landowners, they were very in favor of it with 81% yes. It reached 114% quorum at 34 million voting power. But SIP-8, however, failed because even though it had it did not reach quorum. It only reached 50% of quorum, which was 15 million, unfortunately. So I don't think it received the money. Although now that I think about it, there was no way to check unless you were looking at the wallet. So maybe I don't know. I don't know if they ended up getting the funds. They shouldn't have for this because it didn't reach quorum. All right. Then we get to the SIP-8. We just did SIP-8. Excuse me. And then SIP-9. Yeah, SIP-9 came after that in August, as did SIP-11. Sorry, what am I saying? SIP-9 and SIP-10 both came out in August, right? And there is our first Euro one. It wasn't in Sand, it was in Euro, and SIP-10 was in USDC. So that's where I had to kind of like make a unified conversion. So SIP-9 was 33,000 or 30,000 euros, and SIP-10 was 94,000 in USDC, so it was also 94,000 on the SIP. And SIP-9 was a mandate for DAO NFT collection. That was when people like Sebastian Bourget and Jean-Michel Paun were giving the DAO a lot of NFTs that were valuable, many millions worth. I covered this on multiple times during the SIP DAO. Their absolute success at managing this. However, when they first went up for the vote in August, it failed. Why did it fail? Because it didn't reach quorum. So by that point, quorum issues were in full swing. Only 50% quorum. And then for the second SIP there in SIP-10, which was a budget for blockchain events, so funding a team from the Sandbox Asia to go to events in Latin America and Asia, that failed as well. And both of them, while they received positive views from the council, and they received a majority yes vote, although one barely. Um, less than 500 wallets voted for those two, and only got half quorum, 50%. So that's when we knew things were a problem, and that's where you see some of my SIP ideas were let's reduce the voting quorum because we're having such issues with it, and that was when I went over. What slide was it? Was Yeah, this one right here. This slide here in the scoreboard. One of my SIP ideas was establishing or reducing the voting quorum requirement. My ninth SIP idea. That was because of at this point in time we were having such issues with quorum. Okay, so those two failed. So then what happened? SIP-11 came out, and SIP-12, and SIP-13, all in September of 2024. All right, SIP-11 was ambassador funding at $100,000 or 400,000 sand. Then SIP-12 was establishing a sandbox learning academy in the Philippines. That was $12,000 or 51,000 sand. And then SIP-13 was a $0 SIP for running a feasibility study to do NFT crafting in game. So it was to do a feature within the game itself. Right, ambassador program funding was Sandbox proposed, whereas the Sandbox Academy and the feasibility study were all community proposed. And you know what? Let's for a second change something up. Let's freeze the top. Oops. Let's freeze the top row. That way we can always see it. Yeah, that should be helpful. All right, so there we are, right? And SIP 11, 12, 13. All right, they came out. And the top two, Ambassador Program and Sandbox Academy, were positive, but the feasibility study, which was a feature request, was a negative for the special counsel. All right. However, the Sandbox wallet voted again for both SIP 11 and 12. And they mostly voted because of this. This one here, they really wanted the Ambassador Program to go through. And SIP 12 just happened to be voting at the same time. So they voted on both. Whereas SIP 13 came out later in that month. It was still September. All right. And they all received the yes vote, although it was pretty close. Right? Quorum was 159% and 138%. However, if you took out the Sandbox's 27 million vote, neither would have passed because they wouldn't have reached quorum. So that quorum issue was a big problem. And the only reason the ambassador program passed, as did the Sandbox Academy, was because the Sandbox wallet voted for it, pushing it over quorum. It wasn't supposed to do that. Seb had said how he wouldn't do that, but I guess their interests were really strong on that one, so they voted. All right. However, later on that month, when SIP 13, the feasibility study, went to vote, it did not get a vote from the Sandbox wallet. It did not reach quorum at only 38% quorum, 11 million votes, voting power, excuse me. So it failed. All right. So at this point, the passes and the failures are racking up. We almost have as many failures as we have passing SIPs. So this is a problem. And then October hits, right? So if we look back on our timeline, right, when do we see the delegates show up with their voting power? It's not until November is when the delegates were announced, but the new the applications open up in September, right? And if we look back at our SIP timeline here, September 20th is when the last SIP failed because of quorum. In fact, I think the rest of them. Yep, that's right. It won't be the last one. And here in October, so this is while applications are going on in the Sandbox DAO for the delegates. And the delegates aren't announced until November 13th. Okay, so we have a number more SIPs to cover before we get to November 13th, and that's after. So any SIPs after November 13th now can receive 24 million voting power, yes or no, or abstain from the 12 delegates, but not until November 13th. We're still in September. We have a little bit more ground to cover in October. Okay? And this is really helpful, being able to go back and forth like that. All right. So we are now in October. October 2nd is when two more SIPs come out. One of them is mine, which is what the red is here. Oops, that one should be me. Yeah, that's not Metafutura. Metafutura is this next one here. They did Metaverse and Disability and MetaWorlds. So I, with MetaWorlds, did this next SIP. All right. So SIPs 14 and 15 came out next in October. They both failed. If you want to hazard a guess as to why. But the SIP 14 was enable window sizing and resolution options. That way, because in the game client, you couldn't make it bigger. And the resolution options were really, really very few. So if you had like a 1080p monitor or greater, the resolution options weren't there. It would just be really bad. So I rallied the community and asked them if they would support a SIP to tell the game developers that we wanted to be able to resize the window and window mode and also give more resolution options. And so that ended up failing. because of quorum. Uh, but it was overwhelming majority yes vote. Yes, 60% wanted that. And then yes also wanted the Metaverse and Disability by Metafutura, who wanted to partner in Italy with a disability group to educate and employ folks who have a disability in Italy. That SIP was 30,000 USDC or 30,000 euros at the time. And both of them received negative special counsel recommendations. Less than 200 wallets voted for these two, and the Sandbox wallet did not come to our aid or rescue. But we received the yes vote, and because we only achieved 25% quorum, so quorum is going bad, it's going really bad for everybody. Less than 10 million voting power, which is that's a big gap in what we need for the 30 million quorum. It failed. Both of them failed. Okay, so that was October. Then December. SIP-16 happens. And guess what happened? Because it's December, we now have our delegates. So, do we see a spike in quorum voting? We sure do. So, if we go back to our timeline, the delegates were announced in November. They were each given 2 million voting power to the 12 delegates, so 24 million voting power. So now, if we go back to our SIP timeline, here in SIP-16, December, that means the 12 delegates are now able to apply their 12 million, or sorry, their 24 million combined voting power. SIP-16 and SIP-17 came out in December of 2024. SIP-16 was one of my SIPs. It was a $0 SIP to insert an inventory filter for equipment in the game. For those of you who had a lot of NFTs for the sandbox in game, there was no way to filter it. You had to scroll manually through all of them, and it got really tough to constantly pick your equipment because it reset every time you went to a new experience. So we made a feature request. I made a feature request. Insert an inventory filter in game. Excuse me. I had like I had like nice little pretty pictures and stuff, right? So I wanted to also put a little filter, like a checkbox filter system. Like I had a whole thing, and so that was SIP-16, $0 because the dev team was going to do it. We weren't funding anyone. And then SIP-17 was 83,000 USDC or 80,000 euro, and that was for someone to create a horror game to diversify the sandbox map a little more. All right. My in-game filter received a positive from the special counsel, but the horror game, it also received a positive, and mine was 99% yes. Almost every single of the 500 wallets that voted wanted it, whereas the horror game unfortunately received only 6% yes. Not many of those 600 wallets wanted it. However, because of the push for both the new communications manager, Kanta, building bridges with the community, he built those bridges successfully. And also, the delegates now were pushing for more participation from the community, not just for themselves. So, big bravo, applause, flowers to the delegates for that. Because of that, we got 500, 600 wallets voting for those two, versus before we were under 200 wallets before that happened. So SIP number 16 passed. SIP 17 did not pass because it did not receive the yes vote. However, both achieved quorum. So, yay, quorum seemed to be a thing of the past because now 12 delegates with 24 million voting power were voting, which meant we only need 8 million in other community votes to meet 30 million quorum. All right, halfway there. SIP-18 came out in January. It failed. It was $30,000 in USDC or 60,000 sand. It was mine again. And this one was to fund 15 episodes of this podcast that you're listening to. You'll notice that we are at episode 71. So we kept going. Whereas at the time, I think I was at episode 30. I think thereabouts. Actually, let's take a look because I had a little picture in there. So in SIP 18 was to fund 15 episodes of this. It received that negative recommendation, and because they didn't think it was cost effective, I had interviewed Seb, the co-founder and COO. I had interviewed a lot of people. I was going to bring in more guests, do deeper analysis, more platforms, and had a very consistent above 20 live views in Twitch at the time, which was a lot. It was a lot. So it put me at the top of many categories each time. And I wanted more funding because I was doing it for free. I still am doing it for free. And I had some stats at the time. I'd published 39 episodes within 5 months. So I was pretty much at episode 40. So it was like 30 episodes ago. I was already available on 9 platforms. I had 16 guests answering 180 questions total. Combined 400 hours watched, almost 2,500 likes, retweets, replies. Episodes have been downloaded 271 times. That my top Twitch view count at the time was 27, and my podcast. I'd been hosting podcasts since 2016. At that point, for all my podcasts, I had done 75 episodes across like 3 or 4 podcasts. So I had my milestones and all that, and previous episodes covering the community, special counsel, landowners, voting. I'll go over all this in the next episode, which will be a review of the Sandbox. I'm sorry, a review of the SandDAO podcast and some different stuff. I really wanted 15 episodes funded so that I could start to be compensated for doing all this deep analysis. But unfortunately, it failed. And there was an episode I did all on that. It failed by the skin of its teeth. Almost certainly was because the special counsel gave a negative recommendation that kind of pushed the votes over the edge. 43% yes, 57% no. And that was because one of the major wallets that I helped recruit into voting to help solve the quorum issue voted no, which was Whale Vault, the folks over at Whale. They applied 7 million voting power against it, and that sealed the deal. So, but I had a lot of community support because by that time I had done 40 episodes. So, but it failed ultimately, and I wanted 40,000 USDC, and yeah, but it did get quorum. So, at that point, our quorum issue looked solved. So I basically shot myself in the foot by convincing the folks over at DAO and getting a proposal in their DAO to always vote in the Sandbox DAO. Their first vote in the Sandbox DAO was a no vote on my SIF. So, full circle, shot myself in the foot on that one. I would have received the yes vote if it had not been for that. And I didn't even need it. It was 39 million quorum. So 7 minus, I would have gotten the yes vote at 31 million voting power. Whoops a daisy. But it meant that DAO, which is one of the largest landowners with over 1,000 lands, was constantly involved in the DAO after that, whereas before they weren't participating. And we wanted to solve quorum, so that's a bummer. Anyways, SIP-19 came in February, as did SIP-20. One passed, one failed. So SIP-19 was a $50,000 SIP, whereas SIP-20 was a $150,000 SIP. And SIP-19 was selecting UGC. What does UGC stand for? Again, user generated content platform. It's basically trying to like take the best of Roblox's store page where you can easily find a game to play. This developer was selected from a request for proposal put out by the DAO admin team, hence the TSB is the author here. And the RFPs went out, and a Wake Up Labs won. So you're going to look at here their proposal. Here, there were other, I think 4 or 5 others. It was a 7-page proposal. It looked, and when everyone went through it, they end up choosing that. So it says over here, it'll say, should say various, I think. All right, so SIP-19, if you look on Snapshot, you'll see multiple different, it looks like only 2 at the time, the Council, QA, and then Wake Up Labs. And Wake Up Labs just barely got it at 20 million, whereas the Council got 19 million. So none of the proposals was about 10 million or 20% of the vote. But Wake Up Labs won it at 41% versus the Council's 39%. It was a very, very close race. And they both received positives, right? So SIP-20 was a cross DAO collaboration with the Ape Coin DAO, and it was proposed by Animoca Brands. So that's why I labeled it as TSB, because Animoca Brands own the Sandbox Game Company. Sandbox Game Company were the authors of helped author it. It was a huge amount, 150,000 USDC. All right, but it failed. It got 13% of the vote, whereas this one should say various, actually, because there were multiple folks who got it or were could be voted for. But it received 13% of the vote, and the Sandbox wallet did not vote. Sandbox wallet does not vote again until SIP-22. So both of them did reach quorum, but it was very different in the results. So SIP-20 did not get passed. It was an overwhelming no. All right. SIP-21 came out. Oh, at the same time. Whoops. There we go. Formatted different. So SIP-21 came out. That was one of mine. It was a resubmission of an earlier SIP. So remember back in the process part where you could submit your SIP if it failed after 30 days because it did not reach quorum. Even in the new process, it would be 3 months. But in the old process, it was 30 days, which was when I originally submitted this SIP for. And that period elapsed. It failed because it did not reach quorum, but it received the yes vote. So I was pretty confident if I had resubmitted it, then after the resubmission period, then I would get the yes vote now that quorum has been solved because the delegates were voting with 24 million voting power. So I resubmitted it, got it to vote. It was a $0 vote. It passed, and this is the one that passed with special counsel negative recommendation. So I'll just highlight that one red here for a second because it's special. And it received a negative, but 48% of the vote of those 200 wallets wanted it, whereas 35% said no. It reached quorum at 136% with 40 million voting power. It passed. All right, 22. SIP-22 and 23 both came out in March of 2025. So we turned the page in 2025 with SIP-18 with financing 15 episodes of the SandDAO podcast and its unfortunate failure. Then now we're fast forwarding to SIP-22 and 23, which is March. SIP-22 was Women in Tech Global Summit, the Osaka Protocol. This one, I also interviewed the SIP author for this. This was Women in Tech, and really, I really enjoyed that one. I'll go over that one tomorrow, or not tomorrow, my next episode. But we interviewed the SIP author. It was the Women in Tech group. It wanted 31,000 USDC or 30,000 euro. Both, and then the SIP-23 was the reallocating those 9 budgets categories into the lesser amount, a smaller amount, and it was a $0 SIP because it didn't receive any money. It just wanted to, when that 10 million sand was top up came from the Sandbox Game Company, like it was supposed to in 2025, then it would reallocate it per this new process. Which, let's take a look for a second what that process was. They wanted to put it down to, oh hey, SIP category budget usage. At the time, reigning budget was 85% of our 9 budget categories. We'd expended 10%, and we committed to 4%, which meant we hadn't spent it yet, but it was budgeted and going to be used. Operations budget, we committed 28%, and remaining 23%, we already spent 47%, so half the budget. Right, and that was 1.5 million sand on that one. So where did it say it wanted to change? Here are the budget categories. So it wanted to reduce it to Web3, ecosystem integration, season rewards and game creation, community engagement and charity, education, onboarding technology, operations, and foundation reserve. So from 9 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. From 9 to 6. That's what they wanted. Okay. So that was the SIP-23, the 2025 budget and strategic direction reallocation. And both of them were positive by the special counsel. One was community submitted, one was Sandbox submitted. The Sandbox voted on accident. Seb accidentally voted with the wrong wallet on the Women in Tech one, which was SIP-22. He ended up voting abstain so as to not tip the scales, because by that point they hadn't voted since the Ambassador one and the Sandbox Academy, and I feel like they kind of learned their lesson. Like the community got really, really angry that they did that. Excuse me. Yeah, the community got really, really angry. So they decided to honor the community's um, frustration, and not vote again until accidentally voting on SIP-22. So they voted abstain, which is why this abstain percentage is huge. It's at 53%. So the yes vote was 31%, the no vote was 17%. So more than double the people wanted it to uh, to to pass. 144 wallets voting. So we're dipping below 200 wallets again here. However, because we have um, the delegates, they end up reaching quorum on both of them. But because the Sandbox voted with 27 million voting power, it got 200% quorum at 60 million voting. Whereas with the budget reallocation SIP, it didn't get voted on by the Sandbox wallet. So it barely made it at 105%. But at that point in time, the community felt really good about the delegates, and WellDAO was voting. So we had what we needed for each SIP to reach quorum and pass or not pass. All right. Now we are in April 2025. SIPs, oh, I'm sorry. Yep, April 2025. SIPs 24, 25, 26, 27. 4 of them in a month. All right, SIP 24 was 85,000 USDC. It was a Chrysalis quest. It was another experience creation by a well-known studio, Ashara. And then SIP 25 was 644,000 USDC, and that was to establish the Sandbox DAO grant program, the SDGP. I went over that a little bit earlier, and it was fabulous, fantastic, huge success. It basically created a fast process for people to get funded within that grants program, it elected 5 delegates. Dang it, not delegates. It elected 5 domain advocates from the community. I was one of them. And we had total control over our section of the budget. And it was divided up into the power was there was checks and balances. Like the DAO admin team oversaw our team, but we were able to receive, approve, deny applications from the community. Right? It was awesome. I think I went over this in a previous episode. The submission process. I was able to create my own submission process for my domain and create like a structured process, but a much faster process than the SIPs, as were the other allocations. So Web3 ecosystem integration, season rewards and game creation, education on board and technology, community engagement, and charity. All of those received their own domain allocator. And so there were 4 total. And we would go through all these milestones. We had to like create a structured process. We had to communicate with the DAO admin team quite often. It was awesome. I went over the success metrics earlier in this episode. So I was hugely a big fan of that. It was great. Now it was a big price tag of the budget. So it wanted to allocate 644,000 USDC. So over a million SIP. But keep in mind, we were still riding off of SIP 3's 15.5 million SIP, which at the time was worth $66.8 million, trading at 44 cents per sand. But now here we are about a year later, and that 1.1 million sand is trading at 55 cents, right? So it's worth more. Hence why when you convert that exchange rate, it's 644,000 sand, right? So the TSP authored that one, whereas Chrysalis Quest was a community SIP. The Chrysalis Quest was a negative recommendation, whereas the DAO Grants program was positive. And then let's go back to SIP. There are 2 others in that. Actually, no, let's just keep on with these 2. So SIPs 24 and 25 in the beginning of April. Chrysalis Quest SIP received a negative review, whereas by the council, special council, whereas the DAO Grants STGP received positive. The Sandbox wallet did not vote. Over 300 wallets voted in each of them, and it earned a 70% yes vote for both. Hmm. Well, let's take a look at that for a minute. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, this was the platform. Oh yeah, okay. This was Chrysalis Quest was a platform that was going to enable like in-game quests and airdrops to different experiences. So my experience in DAO Education Hub, for instance, or Floor Droppers, could input a quest would be like, I don't know, pick up a number of items in the experience, and if you do that, then you'll get an airdrop. Or let's race, and if you complete the quest, you get an airdrop. So that was the idea. Because both of them received an overwhelming yes vote and quorum at 117% and 115%, both of them passed. I think, unfortunately, this is one of the ones that was canceled, or maybe it went through it. I don't recall, and was completed. Not sure. All right, so at the beginning of April. The end of April was SIPs 26 and 27. Both of them passed. SIP 26 was the NFT collection for the Sandbox DAO. This was a resubmission by Arthmort's team to, now that quorum was no longer an issue, was asking to become the curator for the NFT collection that had now been sent or was about to be sent by the Sandbox Game Company. So it had like punks in it, apes in it, a lot of like X copies. It had a lot of really valuable things in it. And The NFT collection was only 168,000 USDC compared to 644,000 of the Sandbox DAO grants program. All right, so that was SIP 26. And SIP 27 was an election SIP for the STGP, the Sandbox DAO grants program. They wanted to elect 4 domain allocators. All right. Excuse me. All right. This one was a little bit complicated. As a domain allocator, you had to choose which ones you wanted to go for. So there was Web3 ecosystem. Yule went for that one. Yule Wolf. Rewards and game creation. Joseph went for that one. Community and charity. I went for that one. Education and onboarding. I also went for that one. Community and charity. Ivy went for that one. Education and onboarding. Money went for that one. And there were others. Ivy also went for education onboarding. Money also went for community and charity. So the people who won were the top voted in each category. So Web3 ecosystem, Yule Wolf got 24% of the vote. So he was elected to that domain, that budget. Rewards and game creation was Joseph with 21% of the vote. Community and charity was Lanzer, me, with 20% of the vote. And education and onboarding was me again at 16% of the vote. I couldn't win twice. So it went down to the next person, education onboarding, which was money. G said money. He won with 3% of the vote. And the reason why that happened is because my 16% of the vote, where I won education onboarding, because I can't win twice, like I just said, money was the next runner up. Whereas community and charity, Ivy did not win with 9% of the vote because I won community and charity with 20% of the vote. So that's where it's a little bit complicated. But if you think of there are 4 domains being competed for, whoever got the most in each of those domains won. But you couldn't win 2 domains. So that counted why I won 2 domains, but I couldn't be elected to that second one because I was already elected to community and charity. Hope that makes sense. No peta. No peta. So, salam. Salam, Habibi. All right. And so that's how that worked out. 104% quorum, above 30 million. And so Joseph, it was a special case here. Joseph won with 21% of the vote for awards and game creation. Go check out SANDDAO episodes 1 or 2. I had him on one of those. And then later, I think in SANDDAO 15-ish, had him back again. We talked some philosophy topics for the Sandbox DAO. We also talked at the very beginning of what the Sandbox DAO was. He's well known, very well known voice in the community. Love him to death. So he had to resign from his post after he was submitted, and even though he won very very handily, he had to resign for personal reasons. Well, here's my nomination. Yeah, so I had like my bio here. Everyone submitted their nomination, their bio, what domain they wanted, what their second domain was, what their vision was, how were they going to do fair and efficient evaluation. I use SMART criteria: specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, timely. And I added one, full disclosure. It's something I wanted in there. But then each, here's Money's nomination. I think I was the first one. Yeah, I was the first one to nominate. Then Money, here's his. And then Ivy submitted his or theirs. Then Joe did. Been in the community a long time. Yule Wolf did. Kunta held a space for it, or it was an episode, right? It was a Dig in the Sand podcast episode, which unfortunately was deleted with the rest of the podcast. So bummer, but okay. And So we did it here. I think we did a space as well. Yeah, we did. We did a space. There it is. Long time ago. How about that? So we did a space and I did an AI transcript. That's right. Oh, the source is gone. It's a bummer. But did AI transcript and we're trying to get to so here the order, trying to get to the point where oh, I did an AI generated episode on everybody. Oh, wait, you can't hear that. Whoa, could you not hear the whole time? Oh, that's because browser was turned off. Oh no. I hope you could hear the earlier stuff. If not, no big deal.
Welcome to the deep dive. You flagged something really interesting for
This
us,
was a
a
bonus
proposal
episode.
brewing within the Sandbox DAO called SIP-27.
And
Yeah.
that we use I use Google's they call it Notebook LM. It created a podcast version of your AI stuff. And it always said it couldn't say DAO, it kept saying DAO. So
SIP-27. It's been getting
this is a bonus episode.
comprehensive list of responsibilities outlined. First,
And it went over the
the
actual
lead there with 4.5 million.
In 4.
Domain 4, community and charity. Currently, Lanzer's in the lead there with 4.5 million votes, about 19.81%.
Lanzer leading in one of his preferred domains. And Domain 3.
Domain 3, education, onboarding, and technology. Lancer is also leading there with 4.4 million votes, roughly 19.51%.
Whoa, okay. Lanzer leading in both of his preferred domains currently. That's significant. What about Ivy and money?
Right, the numbers show Ivy
All right. I didn't even mean to go to that one, that section, but there there it is. I forgot I did that. Oh yeah, and I was showed people like how I did it because at the time it had just come out and it was like, a big deal. Oh yeah, I didn't even include a screenshot of how I made it. Uh, so everyone could get like a little snippet of it. Where is it? I'm looking for okay, so here it is. Geraldine announces the winners of the domain. The Vision X is what he's known as, Joseph, right? So the next steps happen, and then I immediately create, like the next day, I think it was. I immediately create. This is what I showed you all earlier, so I won't go over everything all over again. But I I created the structure using the smart goals, and so did the other allocators, domain allocators. All right, so then Ive congratulates everyone, says thank you. Oh, I think here it is. Okay, here it is, I think. This is where they talk about how Joseph is not able to serve the entire 4 months, but so what are our options? And Kunta, the communications manager who was elected, that started building bridges, gave us some options. What were some options? We run another election, the admin team appoints a domain allocator, or another person from the admin team can manage it, or another domain allocator can. And then someone put forth Kami Saze to Kami, who everyone pretty much knows. And no, Pat, I said you can call me Lanza from now on. That's funny. Kami, who is known as Alex, he's on the same team as Joseph on the council QA, and he was put forward as a potential short-term replacement. And he then asked the whole community what they thought. Kami then came in and said he'd be honored to, but he wanted to stress that he only wishes to take this role with the blessing of the DAO and only for expediency, because this was after things had started and we needed to be doing things for each domain allocator needed to be doing things for their domain. So Kami was wanting to step in. Jazz Wolf said normally I want to run an election, but it's time sensitive, so let's put him in. Money said let's put him in. Andy says, let's put him in. Walpak said, let's put him in. I say, let's put him in. Basically, everyone's saying, Kami's there. Everyone knows him. Let's just put him in because we need to get this rolling. So that's what happens. Kami becomes the 4th domain allocator. All right, and that was SIP-27, and it became a huge success. I went over those metrics earlier. All right, now we're in May 2025. Getting to about a year ago. SIP-28 was the only one in May. It was a $60,000 SIP for digital merchandise collection. It was, I think, the SIP was about how to convert NFTs into physical merchandise like hats or sweaters and stuff. $60,000 proposed by the community. It received a positive from the special counsel. 177 wallets voted. However, it received a no vote barely. So it was 31.53% no, 31.51% yes, but 37% abstained. So more people abstained than any other. It definitely reached quorum at 159%. I can't remember why so much voting power. I think maybe the Well DAO had voted again during this one. So they had voted no on mine. And I bet you they voted. They did. They voted for abstain. Okay. But you can see a lot of no's from a lot of the delegates here at the time. Robbie Crachado, Hidden Walls, also known as the intern. Shanti was not a delegate at the time. Mofat, Sebga, Biverson, Moaz. Old One was a delegate that later resigned. I think Shanti took his place. Hishmad, Secret Al, excuse me, Hervé. They were all delegates at the time. So that one did not pass because it received a majority no vote, but barely. So, and the rule here was like if the abstain vote was the majority, it then fell to whether it was yes or no. I think that was the rule. I can't remember right now. I'm pretty sure that was the rule. Must have been, because if it was abstain, then 37% would have won, and abstain probably means no. So I'm pretty sure the no 31.53% won the day on that. All right, so then we go to June 2025, SIP 29. Only 10 SIPs away until we're done. It passed. It was a $13,000 SIP or 33,000 sand. And by this point, sand is trading at 42 cents. It was put forth by the community. It was a positive special counsel recommendation. 200 wallets voted. 59% said yes. It met quorum. So it passed. And that was Impact Game Jam winners. So it was a game jam. Then SIP 30, 31, and 32 all came out in June. All three of them passed. 30 was a $100,000 SIP to fund Token 49, like a side activation. They call it side activation. Basically, that means that they had like an after party at Token 49. So it's about $100,000. Korea Blockchain Week side event was SIP 31. They won $50,000. And then the DAO Education Experience request for proposal came out. That was a $30,000 SIP. All right, that one's red because we won that one. Metaverse, Meta Worlds won that one. It was our $30,000 SIP to do the DAO Education Hub. And remember earlier in the beginning of this episode, I said if you want to learn more about the DAO, there's that gamified DAO Education Hub experience next to Jurassic Park World. This one here, the very beginning of the SIP. This was a gamified way to learn about the DAO within the Sandbox game. That came from SIP number 32, where it was a request for proposal to build a learning experience within the Sandbox game. There were one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 different proposals that were submitted, and we received MetaWorlds, which partnered with Dankoi, who is a very well-known previous Game Jam winner. Also, we paired with Creative Crawler Studio, so this one here, and just like everybody else, we came up with an overview of what were we going to build and what was it going to look like. This was an early version. Dankoi just went hard in the paint, and he came out with an early version of what it would look like. So I was able to include that in our proposal. What were our learning approach, our learning areas going to be? Like, what was our approach going to be? It's going to be learn about the Sandbox ecosystem, which we've gone over in this episode as well at the very beginning, down here, that one right there. So they're going to learn about the ecosystem. They're going to learn about how the Sandbox DAO worked, which was the structure. So a lot of these things you'll see in the gamified version if you go there. All right, so then learn about the special counsel, advisory board, learn about the SIP process. So that would be, I showed this a couple times already in this episode. So the new SIP process, we were going to show how that was going to work. Then voting and discussion. How does voting work? How do you delegate? I'm sorry, how do you vote? How do you vote yes, no? How much sand land was worth? Then we were going to learn about delegates. So how do you delegate? Who are the 12 voting delegates? And then we're going to learn about how do SIPs get curated and how do you get paid, going through the SIP process of submitting a type form and then the request finance PDF I showed earlier on the website. So it was a 3-part team alliance cooperation thing with myself at MetaWorld's team, Dankoi, and then Creative Crawler Studio, all of which who were longtime community members. And here's our milestones. We ended up completing it on time, ahead of schedule. All right, and here's our budget breakdown for why it cost $30,000, which was a conversation in of itself. Some people were most people who responded with $30,000. Not all of them did, but most of them did. And that was because you knew that I almost did this episode as the business of the sandbox, the business of a sandbox studio. Having produced 2 studios myself at that point, the floor droppers and the what was the other one? Floor droppers and lava defense. I knew how much it cost to build one, and almost all of them came out of my pocket, except for Game Maker Fund, which I got enough, but I still lost money on that one because I didn't get really paid much. The developers, the game makers got paid, and most of the expenses went to building that sort of stuff. So you knew that $10,000 was not going to get you a good experience. $20,000 wasn't going to get you a good one either. $30,000 is about what it costs to build a real experience with over 100 unique items or over 70 unique items, minting the whole thing you need to do, block out. It was a very complicated endeavor, which is why it took many months to do. So 30,000 is what I quoted, just like a lot of others did, because that was the maximum that you could quote for that RFP. And all of us who knew that had built this thing before knew that 30,000 was what you needed. And yeah, that is what I needed, and paid my partners and paid the prize pool out for the test to make sure the test was successful. So there's a lot of components that went into it. And yeah, that consumed my life for a time just to make sure that we would do that well. So that was positive by the special counsel. It was decided on variously. MetaWorlds won. 102 wallets voted, received 140% quorum. Okay, then SIP 33 and 34. Almost there. Almost there. You can see the end. SIPs 33 and 34 came out in August. One passed, one failed. SIP 33 passed. It requested 64,000 USDC. So this is August 2025. Sand is now descending. It's decreasing. It's now trading at 35 cents. And that's where Sandbox Metaversity campus wanted to build another university in the Philippines. I think it was the Philippines. Let me not misquote that. It was Indonesia. Maybe Philippines? Yeah, it was the Philippines. So they wanted to build another education place in the Philippines to teach people how to game make and make more game makers. 64,000 USDC. It passed, but the Bali Box Bollywood launch, which failed. I don't recall this one too much. Let's take a look at what the what was. The what section said Bali Box, the Sandbox's first Bollywood themed intellectual property land sale featuring real world events and AI short film premiere. 3 unique events, which would be the booth at a conference, a side event, so after party, and Mumbai meet and greet side party film premiere. So that requested 31,000 USDC. It did not pass. So the Metaversity campus was community proposed, whereas the Bali Box was Sandbox proposed. Both of them received a neutral recommendation from the special council. About 100 wallets voted for each. 63% said yes, they wanted to vote for Metaversity campus in the Philippines. 33%, 42% said no, they did not want Bali Box Bollywood launch. So SIP 34 failed. Both of them reached quorum, 140% quorum. All right, so that was SIP 33 and 34. And SIP 35 came out in late August. It passed. It was 130,000 USDC. Magic Realms AI games. All right, that one was proposed by Pepe and the Sandrush team. They were the same folks who created Magic Palette. So they wanted to expand Magic Palette and to create a playable game within minutes versus however long it took before then or after that, which was probably hours, I guess, maybe less. But excuse me. Right, they wanted to solve the empty land problem. All right, it received another overwhelming yes vote because Samrush team had a pretty successful resume developing Magic Palette. So it passed. It received a positive recommendation from the Sandbox Council. About 100 wallets voted. 86% said yes. It met quorum, so it passed. Then SIP 36. We're now in October 2025. Sand is now decreased to 22 cents, right? Whereas not long ago, it was 40 cents, right? Some month before that, it's 40 cents, but now it's at 22 cents. So, or excuse me, 32? No, we just went over SIP 35. That was 32 cents trading. So in October, SIP 36 and 37, Sam was trading at 22 cents. So that kind of hurts. But both of them passed. So SIP 36 was Land Estate Sales Tool, which I went over this one a number of times. When SIP 39 passed, which paused the Sandbox DAO, it announced that SIP 36 would be canceled. And I said, why? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? GBM is a tool within the Sandbox Game, the website, Sandbox Game website. It provides a safe way to sell your land or buy land, right? Or trade them, auction them off. And it was like a reward mechanic for it rewarded you for bidding because you got sand if you were outbid. So it rewarded you for placing bids. They wanted to create a estate option for selling estates. estates are multiple lands put together, right? A land is a 1 by 1. An estate is, a 3 by 3, 6 by 6, 12 by 12, 24 by 24, or more. So estates get pretty big, and to sell them, you have to sell big, huge bulk of land at the same time. Otherwise, you do not own the whole estate. So the only way to do that used to be a number of websites that offered escrow accounts, like smart contracts. They all vanished. They were, for whatever reason, I've used them over time years ago, but when I tried to use it last year to buy my last estate, I couldn't use any of them because they were all gone. The only way was to use OpenSea, and you could only do it in batches of 50. So if you owned one of those bigger estates, you would have to do multiple batches, and it would be privately sold. So there was like it was a very, very complicated effort to make that happen. So this SIP came out on SIP 36 to provide a safe way for people to sell their estates using the in-house method by the Sandbox DAO partnered with GBM. All right, so they wanted 60,000 to develop that. And then SIP 37 was Metaverse Odyssey integration, which was a $12,000 USDC. I don't recall what that one was. Let's take a look. What? The Metaverse Odyssey Sandbox Edition is a 1-month gamified event series designed to showcase how brands can seamlessly integrate into the Sandbox ecosystem. How are they going to do that? They were going to run a 1-month season gamified events, combining weekly game nights, brand-driven narratives, live streams, custom partner integrations, demonstrating independent studios can leverage the sandbox to deliver community engagement campaigns. Okay, so they're going to run like community-led game jams and different organized events to promote the sandbox and get participation going. So that was going to be a $12,000 USDC. Both of them, both the Land Estate tool and the Metaverse Odyssey integration campaign, both of them were community driven. Both of them received neutral from the special counsel, but both of them passed. Right, so that by that point, the special counsel, almost a couple years into its tenure, it was maintained a very low profile. We didn't really hear much from any of the special council members, except Seb, who was the CEO or the COO and co-founder. He was traveling all the time, and remember, this was October 2025. What happened this past August 2025? Let's take a look at our timeline, our road to DAO. So what happened 2025 in August? The Sandbox company gets restructured. Right? So shortly after the restructuring happens and Robbie Young becomes the CEO and Arthur Madrid becomes chairman and Seb becomes global brand ambassador. So Seb is no longer COO, chief operating officer. That happened in August, right? So if we go back to our spreadsheet here, in August, the last SIP where Seb was COO was SIP 35, Magic Realms with Pepe and the SamRush team. By the time the Lands Estate tool hits, as well as Metaversity or Metaverse Odyssey integration campaign, it's October and the restructuring has happened. So Robbie Young is now the CEO and has not yet held his CEO AMA with Sandbox 3.0. That happens in December, a couple months later. So none of us really knows this is happening. The Sandbox 3.0 is on its way and going to be introduced in December. In October, these two SIPs 36 and 37, pass. So we think we're going to get a land estate tool and an engagement campaign because they passed with the yes vote. And 42% quorum. Or I'm sorry, 140% quorum at 42 quorum amount. That's pretty incredible. That was a lot. Wait a minute. That doesn't look right at all. Hold on, something went wrong here. I checked these numbers. So SIP-35 received 138%. Yep, so that one's correct. That's 41, right? So then, oh, I must have entered the wrong number on accident. SIP-36, take a look at SIP-36, and then SIP-37. So SIP-36 received, 140% quorum. Okay, cool. And SIP-37, 140% quorum. Okay, so I did. Whew. Good to know that when I recheck these numbers that I recheck them correctly. All right, so that's SIP 36, 37. They passed. SIP 38. We're now in December 2025. Sand is trading at 11 cents. Whoops. It's decreased a lot since even a month ahead prior, when in October or a couple months prior, when it was trading at 22 cents, and then it was trading at 35 and 40 cents in July. So within 6 months, we are now down to uh, 11 cents, right? And its all-time high was 66 cents and earlier that year in January. So we went from at the beginning of January 2025, Sam was trading at 66 cents. All right, we get to May, the halfway point of 2025, we're at 45 cents. So it's a notable decrease. Then we get to the end of 2025, we're at 11 cents. That's a 50-cent decrease. That is a huge decrease in sand. So, bummer, big bummer that happened. So, SIP 38 in December, it fails. What was it? It was an art commission grant. However, I don't think it really failed. It's one of those weird, quirky ones. This was an election off of the not metaversity, the Arthmort's team over here, NFT collection, right? They wanted to do an art commission, so they wanted to commission someone to build art for that SIP. That SIP was SIP 26, right? So similar to how an RFP for the RFP for where is it? Oh, okay, so RFP. The request for proposal for SIP 25 was establishing the SDGP program, and then SIP 27 was the election for the SDGP program. Same deal. Over here in SIP 38, Arthmort's team wanted to commission someone to do some art, right? To do like a little mini grant. But it was a $0 because they wanted people to vote on the people they had already selected, not vote that they would use the money for that. They had already decided that they had the authority to use that money from SIP 26. And it seemed like the DAO admin team agreed with him, so that's why I went to vote. So, Art Commission commences, and let's see who won. Random Freaks wins at 44% of the vote. Excalibur, E-Boy, Khalid, Makshush, and Chepertom, they were in the running as well for the DAO Art Commission. All right, so technically the SIP 38 fails. Why does it fail? Because it doesn't meet quorum. 91% quorum at 27%. Now, why does it not meet quorum? Let's take a look. All right. Shanti, 4. Kerchado, 4. Biverson, 2. Hishmad, 2. Batman, 2. Okay. So it looks like that here in December, the delegates' voting power has not yet been rescinded. So they still have the delegate voting power they're supposed to have. Right? I'm looking through the names. Yep, right. I don't see how here Yeah, everyone still has their voting power like they're supposed to. So it must have been because a delegate did not vote that should have. Right. So there's probably some delegates missing from this list here of 27 million voting power. And because of that, the vote does not meet quorum. It doesn't pass. However, I think kind of technically maybe it didn't need to because it was a SIP on a SIP. So we never really get to find out because this happened December 24th, right? So if we look at our little timeline, Robbie Young has already given his Sandbox 3.0 pitch. That change is coming. And then not even a month later, the DAO team announces SIP 39. So what's SIP 39? Our last SIP that we just went through. SIP 39 passes. SIP 39 is a pausing of the Sandbox DAO. I devoted an entire episode to this. I think it was I showed earlier what those were here. The DAO has passed. All right, so SIP 70 was a deep dive into the results, whereas SIP 69 was a read through of the SIP. 668 was clarification from our global brand ambassador on SIP 67. Why do I keep saying SIP? I'm sorry. SANDDAO 70, episode 70, was an update on the SIP results. SANDDAO 69 was a read through of SIP 39, the pausing of the Sandbox DAO. And then SANDDAO 68 was an interview of Sebastian Bourget, the global brand ambassador, which was clarifying the remarks made and the reaction I gave to the DAO pause and SANDDAO 67, which was covering the AMAs here on this timeline of Robbie Young from December. Hold on a second. Fix that. So the AMAs that happened in December and January 28th when they host their AMA. Over here, the one that had that replay bug. Right? So the one that didn't have the replay bug that I was able to cover, I used that episode, those two episodes. Okay? So that is what's happening, the timeline. So SIP 39 comes out to pause the Sandbox DAO. I do a whole episode on that, right? It passes, but it passes with a little bit of underhandedness from the Sandbox company who revokes the 24 million voting power that the 12 delegates have been voting with to meet quorum since since whatever this one SIP-1 is, SIP 15, right? So over a year of the 12 delegates voting with 24 million delegated voting power to meet quorum over here in this column, right? Quorum's great, great. Okay, still great here, but the catch is the Sandbox Game company and the Sandbox DAO shifted 24 million voting from the 12 delegates to itself, which is why it voted with 53 million voting power. It's a pretty big increase from its 27 million voting power that it's been voting with when it would vote accidentally or when it voted for, it really wanted the ambassador program to go through. But it voted with 53 million. This is almost certainly the Sandbox DAO wallet over here. So it got an 80% yes. Caveat, it got an 80% yes because it hijacked 24 million voting from the 12 delegates. And I did the math on that episode where I covered it in depth. If we had not voted, if the delegates would have voted with their voting power, the way they voted and SIP-39 here, with everyone else having voted. Not all delegates voted yes. Some voted no, and vice versa. Right? Some did want to pause the DAO, and others did not want to pause the DAO. So I took them, I created a statistic out of it, and then I applied that to the 24 million that they would have been voting with like normal. And I calculated that had they done that, the SIP would have failed. First, it would have failed because it didn't meet quorum, because that 27 million. But also, it would have failed the no vote. I'm sorry, dang it. It would have failed the yes vote. The no vote would have won. So we would have voted, the community would have voted to not pass the DAO. And that was me applying mathematics to see if we had applied that 24 million voting power and the way it should have been with the delegates. Most of the delegates would have voted no. It would have been close though. It was like 47% no, 41% yes. So it would have been a very close vote. But the no vote would have won. The DAO would not be paused. All right. So there you go. SIP-39. Those are 39 SIPs. Right? And then my honorary mention down there at the bottom here is the TSB roadmap, which I created as a SIP idea back when anyone could create SIPs, and it wasn't allowed to go to vote because the DAO admin team decided to make it a feature request to the dev team. The dev team agreed to do it. And so it didn't have to go to vote because the dev team just said, yeah, we'll create a roadmap. And so the Kunta in February 2025 announced that, hey, big news, the Sandbox DAO Game Company agreed to create a roadmap. And so I claimed honorary victory on that one because it came about as my my SIP idea that wouldn't go to vote. This is what I would have built it as, kind of make it like kind of like a Gantt chart or a pistol chart, what's known as, and try and Meta Worlds is going to build it, but that's where they said, nah, we'll ask the dev team to see if they will, and they did. So they did, and so I screenshotted it. Here's what it looked like. It's no longer available. It was made private about the time that the DAO pause happened. And it was a Trello board. It was awesome. Loved it. People were so happy, and it was very helpful to everyone, like studios who need to pre-plan. Forgot about my formal declaration of war on the 30 character limit, because whenever you reply on the forums, you had to type 30 characters or it wouldn't let you. And everybody made a joke out of it because it was just so difficult to do that sometimes, when all you wanted to do was like make a few words like, yes, I agree. But you can't say that because it's not 30 characters. So everyone would just like, I don't know, copy pasta stuff. And everybody would just like add random stuff to the to their responses. So I decided to declare war on the 30 character limit, and then I copied a speech from Churchill. The storm that we'll fight on the beaches, we'll fight in the landing fields and on the streets, and then I just changed all the words to like Sandbox DAO specific stuff. It was funny. I thought it was funny. So yeah, there we go. The intern, also known as the Hidden Walls, he immediately spotted Winston Churchill's speech out of that. So yeah, so Kunta, our communications manager, said, yeah, if anyone else is sick of it, let's try and get rid of it. And so everyone was, yeah, see, look, there it is. Kunta added just like random characters to meet the 30 character limit. It was a nice little community rallying moment, and yes, so we were able to make a game out of it for a while, and eventually the character limit was able to be reduced, And I'm sorry, increased. Yeah. I'm sorry, reduced. It reduced to 10 characters, and we won the war. So good times. That was a fun time. And Kunta did a spaces with it. We did it. Victory. We won over the 30 character limit, and it was reduced down to like 10 or something. Oh, I copied another Winston Churchill speech and made it into the DAO. I don't know. Since we're talking about the Sandbox DAO, I decided to dote on this for a second. It was a fun little moment. Oh, there it is. There's the space. What space was that? Yep. We did a spaces on it. Right? And oh yeah, I did talk. I must have talked. And we had different people on. Oh man. One day I might want to go back and listen to that. Let's play a few seconds of that. How about?
It's broken down into, excuse me, just ate breakfast. Absolutely. I wanted to shout out the name of that person that just jumped in here. I don't know if I can pronounce that though. Zadaku is the best I'm
farming or something like that. Some people.
I imagine the dev team has to face, a dynamic workload that might shift from season to season, even because it's founder-driven company still, and
so it was fun, good time. All right, so I brought that up to say that this was a SIP idea that I had that did not go to vote, but ended up being implemented. So I claimed honorary victory on that. All right, so there's our 39 SIPs. Okay, so let's go over the last bit of today's episode, SandDAO podcast. All right, so we went over the timeline, then we went over the structure. Okay. There we go. Timeline, structure. Why are we suddenly not able to do this? Hold on. Fix this. There we go. Okay. Timeline, structure. And now we just finished going over 39 SIPs for the Sandbox DAO SIPs. All right. We went a little bit into snapshot, mostly went on the updated checkbooks. We went over the admin team's kind of alternative view on how the numbers crunched. And then we just went over the 39 SIPs here in the results review. The last thing we'll cover now are the statistics. So where does that leave us on our statistics? Here are the statistics as I calculated them. All right. So, whoop. Okay, we do that. There we go. Maybe this is not going to work here. Let's go to our other slide. This one. Oh, it's because there's an updated number, right? Yeah, let's put in a new. Yep. Boom. There we are. Cool. All right. So let's just go over this one then. So here are our statistics that I've calculated after 39 SIPs. Our first SIP, Sandbox Improvement Proposal, came out June 12th, 2024. The last SIP ended February 25th, 2026. So it was about a month ago. The number of days our DAO was active was 623 days. Because when it paused, it paused now here at the end of the month, about 8 days. All right, that's 20 months of active DAO, over a year, about a year and a half, looks like. We had 39 SIPs that went through the voting process. 27 of them passed, which is 69% of the 39 SIPs total. 12 of them failed, which is 44% of the 39 SIPs total. Of those 39 SIPs, 24 of them received a positive special counsel recommendation, which was about 62% of the 39 SIPs. 6 of them received negative special counsel recommendations, which were 22%. And as we learned, just because it had a negative special counsel recommendation didn't mean that it would not pass. Mine for SANDDAO, the fund SANDDAO in SIP-18 did not pass, and it received a negative. However, my SIP-21 resubmission of the Windows resizing received a negative, but it did pass. So, but it's still important to know it was a heavyweight factor for a number of voters. All right, our average voting power that was voted on per SIP was 36 million. Right, so we struggled with quorum for about till SIP 16 until the delegates came into power with their 24 million voting power. But even then, for all 39 SIPs, the average voting power per SIP was 36 million. So that's above quorum. However, that 1% there, that is 1% of the total voting power that is out there in the world. Blockchain. All right, so 3.4 billion voting power is out there. All right, now how did I get that number? That number came from calculating the circulating sand supply, right? So 3 billion total sand supply. Not all of it is available for voting. 2.6 billion of it is circulating. So in theory, 2.6 billion of it is available for voting. I use that number. That number plus the land supply, which is 166,000 times their 4,500 voting power per land, whereas sand is 1 voting power per 1 sand. So that's 2.6 billion sand voting power plus 749 million land voting power equals 3.4 billion voting power total. Of that total voting power that is possible to vote on, because we're taking out strategic reserves, we're taking out stuff that hasn't been released yet. If you go up there to average voting power per SIP, only 1% of the total voting power out there voted on average per SIP, which is not a lot of participation, but it's still a lot of voting power. All right, so how many wallets voted per SIP? On average, 369. Now that number, that percentage is way lower because if you go down and figure out how many wallets there are, right, how many sand and land holders are there total who can vote? Almost 400,000 holders out there of the sand token and the land NFTs. 394,000 different wallets. Now that's not counting unique wallets. That one, I couldn't calculate that for land because there was no method that I could find to do that. So I just counted the number of wallet holders. Understanding that, sure, it's multiple people have, some people have multiple wallets. Got it. Even so, 300 wallets voted on average and 39 SIPs, which equals less than 1%. So 0.09% of the total sand and land holders were voting, which that's yeah, that's not very good. That's very bad. That is way below. I think industry average is 15% participation, something like that, maybe 20. So we are way below that. All right. The number of times that the Sandbox voted with their wallet was 6, so about 15% of the 39 SIPs. And the average SIP amount, the average SIP cost about $100,000 USDC, which we know changed quite a bit from June 2024 when SAND was trading at 44 cents to now SIP-39 in February 2026 when it's trading at 9 cents. Big difference. And at this exact moment, it's trading at 8 cents. So it looks like it even went down a penny since when I pulled this, earlier today. So it's still going down, looks like. But the average cost per SIP was 99,000 USDC. Yeah, quite a bit. And I can't use the sand amount because not everything was in sand, so that was hard to calculate. All right, now the last bit here is the sand received by the DAO, and this only recipient was from the Sandbox Game Company, was 15.5 million sand, which at the time it was received by the DAO was 6.8 million USDC. All right, and using that same calculating value of when the SIPs were voted and when they ended and what the sand was trading at that exact time, we spent 2.3 million USDC, which is roughly 34% of our received budget, how much we received, that 6.8 million. All right, so we received 6.8 million, we spent 2.3 million, and what we have left is 4.5 million. That's the pure calculation. If you use today's value of 8 cents, my calculations are 359,000 USDC is left, which is 5%. So using the pure value, we have 66% of our budget left. If you use the relative value of what sand is worth right now, and you calculate all of the sand that's left using 8 cents, you get 5% left of the budget. So that's the big disparity that the admin team was talking about in that other slide that I discussed way back here. But I don't have access to their formulas, so I have to use my methods, and my methods, this is the best way I could do it. Right? So it's anywhere from 359,000 to 4.5 million, which is what the admin team said. Cyril said he calculated 891,000. Right, so there it is. Today's sand exchange rate is right now 8 cents, whereas it went down even from 9 cents last month when it was SIP-39, when we were calculating that number. And then here's the last bit. Almost there. Circulating sand supply is 2.6 billion. I already discussed how that was calculated. I used CoinGecko, by the way. So if you go to here, CoinGecko, and now it's at 7 cents. Oh shoot, it's even going down further. Here it is. This number right here, 2.6 billion is circulating versus the 3 billion total supply. Okay, so going back to circulating supply is 2.6 billion, which means that the circulating voting power is 2.6 billion because one sand is one voting power. Even though the total supply is 3 billion. The total land supply is 166,000. I showed the about page on Sandbox.game's official website citing that number. And that means 166,000 times 4,500 is 749 million voting power. Right? And so 2.6 billion plus 749 million is 3.4 billion total voting power that's available. All right, and then I calculated, this one took a little bit longer, the sand and land holders. And all I did for that to count 394,000 was I just went to the token page of all of the token and the land NFT, which there are 4 of them. And that's because we originally started out on Ethereum and then migrated to Polygon. So you have land and sand on both Polygon and Ethereum, but it's not quite so straightforward as adding it all together, because land can only be used on one chain. So if you migrate it from Ethereum to Polygon, it's burned on Ethereum. You can't use it on Ethereum. but then you can migrate it back and it gets burned from Polygon and now you can use it on Ethereum. So there's a migration contract there. But you can use sand and land on both chains and they add to your total value. So you have to do it a little bit like this. You have to use the tokens, the holders, right? So I'm gonna blow that up a little bit. So on Ethereum, you use the token holders, which is 206,000, plus the token holders on Polygon Scan, which is 161,000, and then you use the holders on Ethereum Scan, which is 16,000, and then you use the holders on Polygon Scan, it's 9,000. Add all that together, what do you get? 394,000. So those are my numbers. That's how I calculated that. And with that, we just went over all the statistics for 39 SIPs beginning in 2024 and ending in 2026. What did we learn? Quorum was a big issue until the 12 delegates were approved and 24 million voting power could be applied. All right, so that was about, I think, SIP 11. Is that what I said? It was SIP 15, right? Sandbox DAO, while it voted 6 times, right? And voting and yes, no, and it did have an effect on the yes no vote on the way. SandFam voted yes no. All right. But some SIPs passed even with. Oh, hold on. I got mixed up here. Sandbox DAO wallet voted 6 times. Okay. Whoops. Hold on. So this next one would be special counsel recommendation. So Sandbox DAO wallet voted 6 times. And what did we learn from that? It first used its voting power to pass founding SIPs. And that was the carbon capture, SIP-4, and SIP-5, the Red Cross, which we think was to avoid the SIP failing due to quorum, but we're not sure because of the way timing happened. All right, we also learned special counsel recommendations did have an effect on the way SandFam voted yes or no, but some SIPs were able to pass. All right, so one SIP that was voted no because of that was SIP 15. Or wait, it was SIP 18, which was this podcast, funding this podcast. But some SIPs were able to pass despite a no recommendation, right? And so that was SIP 21 and SIP 24. Yep. So SIP 21, 24. All right, what was the last thing that we learned? The pausing DAO SIP, which is SIP 39, passed only because the Sandbox wallet transferred 24 million voting power from the delegates to itself and voted yes. Otherwise, SIP 39 would not have made quorum and still and would have had majority no vote by the community. And there we have it. Boop. In conclusion, yeah, if you want to go look at the Sandbox DAO pause miniseries, go to those 4. And if you want to go to the Sandbox Foundation miniseries for Grand Cayman Islands, look at these. All right. I didn't have any community questions. Thank you, Nopeta, not Jackie Chan, for participating in the chat. Yeah, not Jackie Chan. That's right. Character limit war was funny. All right. And then what are open topics? Concluding remarks on the Sandbox DAO, its promise and pause. I think I went over the disappointing way the pause happened. It shouldn't have happened that way. But it did. So here we are. The promise of the Sandbox DAO was progressive decentralization. And I think one member put it really, really well in the SIP-39 discussion forums. Lily said, the tail, which was the community, did not... Whoops, I had backwards. The head, which should be the community, did not eat the tail fast enough. The tail being the Sandbox Game Company and the centralized nature of the DAO. That the tail, we did not eat the tail fast enough, and the tail ate us instead. So it paused the DAO because we did not progressively decentralize fast enough, and we didn't progressively decentralize fast enough because the DAO admin team did not believe that we had matured enough as a DAO, which it probably might be even be true. Because once we kind of learned from Digging the Sand podcast with Kunta and the interviews that he did with the DAO admin team, we learned a lot about why things were the way they were, and they made a lot of sense. Once I heard that, a lot of my criticism went away because we learned that Cyril explained they thought that having a big splash grand entrance was going to be big and beneficial to the DAO. Having a having a special counsel that was, celebrity laden with the likes of Yatsu and other really well-known names in the Web3 space, like Jean-Michel Payoun, who used to run Ledger, and Yatsu run Animoca brands. Like having that sort of celebrity status would also draw a lot of attention to the DAO. They had good reason to believe that because attention economy was a big factor in an ApeCoin DAO, apes, NFTs. It's just, that attention economy is important in Web3. So they had good reasons to believe all that. It just didn't turn out that way. The DAO struggled with quorum almost from the beginning. And the big splash that happened where the DAO showed up, it was announced at a conference and then everyone was asked to vote, backfired on the DAO admin team because it felt like the community was just kind of being drug along and didn't have any participation in any of this. So it backfired big time. And I was at the very front of that. I was very critical because there were a lot of things done that didn't look like it involved the community at all. It just looked like it was handed down. And so I was very, very critical. From like SANDDAO episodes, I think maybe 10 to like 30. Maybe even 40. I'm not sure. Well, when I do the next episode, SANDDAO 72, we'll do a review of all the SANDDAO episodes and then we'll go over it then. But I was very critical for a really long time. And until I saw those episodes, Digging in the Sand, where they interviewed various members of the DAO admin team, especially the DAO admin, the DAO administrator Cyril, explained what their plan was, their intent. It made a lot of sense. They weren't They weren't bad. They weren't like people suspected of all these bad things anymore. We became real people with a real plan. It just didn't work out the way they thought. So I get it. I understand it. Not, I mean, not every plan works like you think it does. So I can understand that they gave it their all. They really care about the DAO. Cyril, Geraldine, uh, Paul, um, Wampy, and I'm sure there are others that I might not be remembering at the moment. I'm so sorry. They care a lot. They cared a lot about the DAO, and they gave it a lot of work and effort. And I saw it. A lot of other people saw it, especially when you're a DAO. When I was a DAO domain allocate for the SDGP program, I got to talk with the DAO admins a lot more because we had to work with them to maintain transparency, and learned a lot about how much they cared. Saw how much effort they put into everything, and they put in a ton of effort. So it just didn't go the way we thought. It didn't go the way they thought, and the community was very frustrated. For still, I think to this day, there's a lot of that. But when Kunta came in as a communications manager, he built so many bridges. He rebuilt so much of that trust, and it was appreciated, big time. It turned my view around. I went from being highly critical of the DAO to being a big advocate for the DAO admin team because I saw what it was, and they became very transparent about what their thought process was, and that's what I wanted to know. Mostly, I wanted to know their thought process, that we weren't being taken advantage of or exploited, and all these other negative things that happens when you don't have transparency and you don't know what's going on. So, yeah, the pause is unfortunate. The good news is it's called a pause. It's not called termination or elimination. Most people think that it won't be unpaused at this point. Most people think, I believe, from the discussion forums and stuff, Twitter and X and Discord, that this is kind of like a Sandbox Game Company's nice way of taking it out to pasture, which is a euphemism for saying being eliminated and not resurrected again, unpaused. I hope that's not the case. I hope that there is a real effort to unpause the DAO because I love the sandbox and I love the ecosystem and I love SandFam and I want to run for special counsel if it gets unpaused. So yeah, I think the stuff that I've been doing in Star Atlas with its DAO as a now second term council member, where we have all of our meetings in public. If I can find that. Right, so the Star Atlas DAO, I've been recording as kind of like the community chairperson. Yep, here we are. Right, so we have all of our meetings in public, and like when we start, we have, you know, we have meeting minutes, agenda topics. We talk about things. We go over the treasury amount, like here, and we go over how much money we have and we're spending. And then we have our meeting minutes, which we have an agenda, and then we go over them in our discussion. And it's building in public. To me, it's what building in public really means. And I think it's awesome. I think we should be doing that in not Star. We should be doing that in the sandbox. Our special council members should have public meetings. We should be live streaming it for content and for attention economy. And we should be talking about things we want to accomplish. How are we going to accomplish it? What authority do we have to accomplish it? And what authority do we not have? All of that's part of building in public. And because we did so much research into what authority we have, hint, hint, Foundation Company miniseries, we now know how to have these conversations fruitfully and beneficially within the sandbox ecosystem. So we have high highly experienced professionals who can do a really good job on the Sandbox Foundation Special Counsel. More than just giving a yes, I like this SIP, no, I don't think so, or neutral. Way more than that. And we've been doing it for over a year in the Star Atlas DAO. Yeah. Not Jackie Chan in chat said, mistakes were made, lessons were learned, some good times and laughs along the way. Pretty much how life goes, I suppose. Exactly. Not Jackie Chan. Exactly. I completely agree. Yep, and here we have our own little tracker for their improvement proposals over in Star Atlas. All right, so yeah, there it is. Let's conclude today's episode because it turned out to be a long one, a lot longer than I thought it would be. Thanks for holding on with me, not Jackie Chan, no better. So that's going to archive the Sandbox DAO. We just went through everything, and I'm very happy we did because maybe this episode might be the only thing left of the Sandbox DAO. If the Sandbox DAO forums disappears, if the X account disappears, the YouTube account already disappeared for the Sandbox DAO. So if any of it else disappears, we'll still have this to look back on if we need to. All right. Episodes. We are now in episode 71. All right. So we did episode 70. And we're now in episode 71, which is today. I didn't do it that day. When did I do it? Hold on. Yeah. All right. So episode 71 is done. We only have one episode left before I shut down, or I'm going to pause the SandDAO podcast. Only one episode. And that's going to be a review of the SandDAO podcast. I wasn't able to lock in a time to interview Yatsu. His schedule was busy. And also, I think probably the timing of this DAO pause probably had something to do with it. That I wasn't able to secure a meeting with his staff. But up until that point, he was very willing to do it, and we just had to find a time. So I didn't schedule it fast enough, but that's a bummer. And then the accidental sniping of a fellow ape when Yuga broke a Guinness World Record. I'm not gonna do that one at this point. It's past. But when I broke a Guinness World Record some years ago, and then listed it as a resume item when trying to help another ape with their Guinness World Record. Suddenly, a month later, Yuga Labs is breaking the Guinness World Record that I broke and I listed on my resume in the forum. So I didn't think that was an accident. I think that they saw that and said, "Hey, let's break that world record." So, but they broke it. It is what it is, and congratulations to Yuga for holding the record. Not just breaking it, smashed it. I think we had 1,200 was our record. 1,200 FPS players in a single match. They smashed it with like 2,200, 2,500, 2,200 people. How cool is that? Oh, that's the wrong one. I want to do this one here. 2,200 people. That's pretty neat, right? There it is. Congratulations to them. They smashed it. Great job. So, I'm not gonna do that episode. I did not get around to interviewing the last DAO delegate, which was Mo from Animoca Brands. And bummer, our schedules isn't in line on that. And then the Sandbox ecosystem and the DAO and the business of the Sandbox. I'm not going to get around to that one at this point. Don't really see much need. If I unpause the SandDAO podcast, maybe we will. I did talk about a little bit though when we discussed the $30,000 building of the Sandbox DAO Education Hub and how the cost really outweighed a lot of what we were given up to that point in grants. And so that $30,000 one represented a fair payment in my estimation, and many others, because most of us knew that it cost more than 10,000. And so the two that I built, I built at a loss, and a lot of that money came out of my own pocket, unfortunately. I didn't recoup any of that investments because the NFT program changed, the Catalyst program was introduced, and we were no longer able to just mint our assets for sale because you need Catalyst. So it increased the cost and the time and the effort, and they wouldn't give us any Catalyst in the GMF program, and it just ended up being a dud, and we weren't able to recoup any money. So that's a bummer, but yeah, here we are. All right, Sandbox Spaces, where do we congregate? Forums, Discord, Twitter, X, on YouTube. All right, so the Sandbox DAO is now gone. So let's make that a little bit more opaque. Opacity. I guess the adjustments need to be made here. Yeah, let's go ahead and make that. Bummer. Big bummer. Well, all good things must come to an end. And Sandbox Spaces, Bulls on the Block, I don't think they're going anymore. I think they might have stopped. I need to ask Bulls on the Block folks. I don't see them on Saturdays as much like I used to. Coffee with Captain, that one's back on. Well members, they're still going strong every Tuesday. All right. But while I find someone to raid, let's figure out, let's read the chat. It's not Jackie Chan, I see you put something in there. I think AI will be studying your documentation of SANDDAO for benefit of future generations or for Skynet. Either way, it's appreciated. Thanks, not Jackie Chan. I appreciate you. You stuck it out. I really appreciate you. All right, let's raid someone. Okay. All right, how about this? Can I raid him? Nope. Can I raid him? I sure can. All right. Raid is set. Thank you all for your time. This was SandDAO 71, a review of the Sandbox DAO podcast from 2024 to 2026, when it was born in 2024 and when it paused in 2026. Thanks, SandFam. Have a good day.